Hi guys. Tonight we drift back into a world where icy winds rule the hours after sundown and the ground beneath your feet feels older than memory itself. You step into this frozen dusk as if the air has thickened around you, each breath a slow cloud curling upward. You are walking through a Europe that does not resemble anything you know. There are no villages, no smoke columns, no warm lights in the distance. Just a vast sweep of darkness settling over plains dusted with frost. Somewhere behind you, a glacier groans like a deep animal turning in its sleep. In front of you, a cave entrance waits like an open mouth, and the sky above is so full of stars that you wonder how anyone managed to rest under such cold brilliance. You probably will not survive this if you keep wandering without a plan, but you keep going anyway, because your curiosity fights off common sense. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you want, let me know your location and your local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights. Your footsteps soften as you move toward the cave. The first thing you notice is the silence. A frost-covered world absorbs sound in a strangely gentle way, as if even noise is too fragile to survive these temperatures. Snowflakes cling to your eyelashes, and the cold presses against your skin in a steady, patient way. You know that the people who lived here nearly 500,000 years ago did not have fire yet, at least not in any consistent or controlled sense. A mainstream historical fact is that early Neanderthals appear in the archaeological record around 430,000 years ago, long before dependable fire-making technology became universal. So you imagine their nights stretched out without flame, without glowing embers, without the comforting hiss of burning logs. As you approach the dark shelter, you picture those early figures stepping inside, shaking off snow, rubbing their hands together, and preparing for a sleep routine shaped by raw elements. The ground inside is cool but dry. Your fingers trail along a stone wall that carries the faint mineral smell of iron and dust. It is strange to think that this cave once sheltered families who knew nothing of electricity or insulated homes. They depended entirely on their bodies and each other. Historians still argue whether they were the first hominins to intentionally pick sheltered winter spots, or if they simply drifted into whatever hollows the environment provided, guided more by instinct than planning. Your eyes adjust to the dimness. The ceiling arches above you, rough but protective. You imagine an early winter night settling in here. The cold would seep slowly like water soaking into fabric. You look toward an alcove that feels slightly warmer, simply because the wind does not reach it. A quirky tidbit that often gets overlooked is that Neanderthals may have favored caves not only for shelter but also because the acoustics told them things. A quiet cave with soft echoes hinted that it was safe. A cave with sharp, snapping echoes might mean cracks or unstable stone. You can picture someone testing the space with a low hum, listening for the way the sound bounces back. You crouch down, touching the floor. There is nothing soft here, just packed earth and scattered stones. If you imagine lying here overnight, your bones ache in sympathy. Yet this cave once supported entire clans. You close your eyes and imagine their nightly preparations, the faint rustling as they gathered in, the heavy breathing of tired bodies, the slight chemical scent of animal hide clothing, oily and well used. The wind outside deepens, humming like a distant flute. A patch of moonlight spills across the entrance and then slides away as clouds drift past. You stand there, wrapped in the moment, picturing yourself as an ancient wanderer settling down for sleep. But unlike you, they were adapted. Their bodies were broader, their noses shaped to warm cold air, their muscles dense and powerful. You feel small inside their world. As you move farther into the cave, your footsteps stir a faint dustiness from the floor. You imagine the early Neanderthals doing the same, brushing aside rocks to make a bit more room. They would have known the subtle signs of night approaching. Maybe a tightening in the chest from dropping temperatures. Maybe the way cold seemed to find every gap at once. Maybe the way the sky's color shifted from steely blue to ink dark so quickly it felt like someone pulled a curtain over the world. You settle yourself against the stone, letting your imagination sink deeper. Without fire, sleep was more than rest. It was survival. Your body had to conserve energy. Your breath had to slow. Your muscles had to relax without surrendering fully, because something might prowl outside. You think of their ears constantly tuned to the soft crunch of snow, the crack of a branch, the low growl of a distant big cat. The cold could kill, but predators could kill faster. It is mesmerizing to think that this same night repeated itself for hundreds of thousands of winters. You picture the sky shifting through ages, continents shifting in climate, the ice sheets growing and shrinking, while generation after generation return to caves like this one. You sense their ordinary nights, the ones that never made it into textbooks. Parents soothing children with quiet murmurs. A young hunter returning exhausted from tracking prey. Someone injured being carried carefully to a soft spot against the wall. You let that image rest in your mind like a gentle rhythm. You look up again at the ceiling. The stone above feels endless, like a frozen wave held in place. You imagine a Neanderthal tracing cracks in the rock with their eyes, learning the patterns by heart. Knowing these patterns might have been a simple comfort or even a quiet ritual, and you realize that humans today still do this. We lie in bed watching shadows move across the walls. Some things refuse to change across the millennia. The air cools as you breathe out. You rub your arms, feeling the limitations of your modern body. But as you picture their world more clearly, something inside you begins to shift. You stop thinking of them as primitive. You begin to feel the depth of their endurance, the sheer stubbornness it took to survive 400,000 winters without dependable flame. You step deeper into the quiet, letting the story pull you forward. You let the darkness cradle you as you step farther into the cave, where the air grows still and the stone walls gather your breath like a quiet companion. The world outside feels brittle and sharp, but inside these natural chambers the atmosphere changes. You sense how the cold softens just enough to let your shoulders drop. The cave becomes a buffer, not warm exactly, but sheltered in a way that feels strangely kind. You imagine Neanderthals discovering this same transition, stepping out of punishing winds and into this muted calm. The place is not inviting by modern standards, but compared to the icy plains, it might as well be velvet. A mainstream historical fact is that many known Neanderthal sites are in limestone caves across Europe. These caves were not accidental shelters. Some remained occupied for centuries at a time, reused by generations who recognized their advantages. You can almost feel the limestone absorbing your body heat, holding it in gentle suspension instead of letting it drift away. Even if the temperature stays low, the stone buffers the harsh swings that happen outside. In deep winter, that difference could mean life. You run your palm along one wall. The surface is cool but not freezing. It has a faint powdery feel that leaves a film on your fingertips. You picture ancient hands doing the same, maybe testing for moisture, maybe checking for loose fragments, maybe just resting against something solid during a moment of quiet. Historians still argue whether Neanderthals chose caves strategically or simply followed migratory routes that happened to pass through regions full of good geological formations. You imagine both possibilities. Either way, once someone stepped inside on a winter night, the logic would become clear fast. The darkness thickens as you move deeper. In a world without artificial light, sight gives up quickly, and your other senses surge forward. You hear your own breath louder. Your footsteps crunch softly on tiny fragments of broken rock. The cavern smells faintly of damp minerals mixed with the ancient dust that slumbers here. Now imagine lying down in this space without fire, without blankets, without anything except the clothes on your body and the heat of the people beside you. Your ears would take over. You would listen to the walls for hints of weather shifting. A low whistle from the entrance might mean wind picking up. A muffled drip could warn of melting ice and unstable ceilings. A quirky tidbit comes to mind as you walk. Researchers studying prehistoric caves sometimes note the surprising acoustic properties of certain chambers. Some areas carry sound in a warm, rounded way, while others echo sharply. You picture Neanderthals discovering that a particular nook carried their voices softly, almost like a natural soundproofing effect. Maybe that nook became the favored sleeping corner. Maybe it became a quiet refuge for anxious family members during storms. Caverns can shape emotion as much as climate. You move toward a wider chamber, and the air changes again. The ceiling lowers slightly, making the place feel more intimate. Your footsteps seem to hush themselves. You imagine a small family grouping here, tucking themselves into the angled wall where the ceiling slopes down. The natural geometry creates a sense of protection, a cradle of stone. You crouch down and picture yourself settling in for the night. You feel the hardness of the floor in your knees. You can see why they might have layered moss or grass later on, but here in the early days, before systematic bedding, it was simply earth and endurance. Your breath creates a faint cloud in front of you, though it fades quickly in the cavern's stillness. You imagine dozens of breath clouds forming at once during ancient nights, rising and mingling like ghostly threads. The combined warmth of many bodies would slowly lift the ambient temperature, though not to comfort, more like easing from deadly cold to merely harsh cold. In that tiny difference, survival hides. You shift your weight and try to sense how a Neanderthal might perceive this space. Broader chest, shorter limbs, a body built to retain warmth. Their bones heavier, their muscles thicker, their silhouette powerful but compact. Inside this cave, that body type fits perfectly with the purpose. You realize that the cave and the people adapted to each other across millennia, one shaping the other. You close your eyes and imagine lying back against stone. The sound of wind becomes distant, like a long sigh. The constant threat of frostbite lessens. Predators lose their advantage here. The narrow entrance acts like a natural choke point. A single alert individual could guard it while others slept. This natural design probably influenced nightly habits more than we will ever know. You inhale deeply. The air tastes of minerals and the faint memory of ancient fires lit long after the era you are exploring. But tonight, in this story, there is no fire, just stone, breath, darkness, and the quiet pulse of the cave itself. You feel the silence shift around you, no longer empty but full of presence. The cave becomes a character in your imagination, a guardian, a witness, a home shaped not by human hands but by time and pressure. And you sense how early humans must have trusted it the way you trust a familiar room today. You curl your fingers against the floor, feeling its firmness, imagining how night after night this same supportive earth-cushioned bodies worn from long days of foraging and wandering. You picture someone settling a child against the wall, using their own arm as a pillow. You breathe in again and exhale slowly, letting the rhythm guide you deeper into the moment. You can almost hear the rustle of hides, the soft shifting of sleepers, the gentle hum of voices that once echoed here. You remain still, letting this ancient quiet fold over you like a blanket made of time. And as your senses steady in the dimness, the story moves on, leading you deeper into the ways these early people prepared for sleep in a world colder than your imagination had expected. You move farther into the cave, letting the darkness settle gently around your shoulders as you picture the nightly rituals of long-forgotten winters. The ground shifts under your feet, packed from ages of use, and you crouch lower, imagining the texture exactly as early Neanderthals felt it. Your fingertips brush the earth. It is uneven, surprisingly firm, and dotted with small stones that jab at your skin. Instantly you understand why these ancient sleepers had to reshape this unforgiving floor into something their bodies could tolerate through endless nights of cold. You picture a group arriving here at dusk, their breaths blending in the chilly air, each one searching for familiar spots. They would scoop away jagged rocks, smoothing the earth through a simple routine performed thousands of times. You imagine someone gathering bundles of moss, maybe strips of softer grass, layering them carefully inside shallow scrapes in the ground. Archaeologists have found evidence in some prehistoric caves that early bedding layers built from vegetation compressed under weight over time. That insight alone tells you that the people living here did not simply collapse onto bare stone every night. They shaped their sleep environment with a quiet practicality that carried them through bitter seasons. Your hands explore a shallow depression in the cave floor. You imagine how a few handfuls of dried moss could soften it. Maybe someone chose this particular nook because the stone above formed a gentle tilt that shielded them from falling frost. Perhaps an elder settled here, leaning against the natural curve of the wall. Researchers sometimes mention that fossilized plant fragments have been found in bedding impressions, suggesting that Neanderthals layered materials not only for comfort but also to reduce insects. That detail adds a strangely domestic note to this cold world. You shift your weight and picture a line of sleepers preparing for rest. The soft rustle of dried vegetation, the scratch of moss, the muted thump of bodies settling down. No firelight flickers here. Only the faint glow that creeps in from the cave entrance, pale and watery. Your eyes catch the shape of a distant opening, the winter sky barely visible. Still, even this faint light would have been enough for individuals well adapted to night vision. They would have known how to read their surroundings by shadow more than sight. Some specialists discuss the possibility that Neanderthals preferred certain bedding arrangements because they helped regulate temperature. Plant layers trap air, acting like simple insulation. Imagine lying here in deep winter. Without that insulation, the cold would seep straight from the stone into your bones. With it, your body retains precious warmth. You feel this truth as you sit now, sensing how even a slight cushion could change the entire experience of the night. A small, unusual detail often mentioned in cave studies crosses your mind. In some sites, traces of specific aromatic plants have been discovered mixed with bedding remains. You picture someone gathering these plants for their pleasant smell or possibly for their insect-deterring properties. The idea feels tender, almost modern. Even in a world of predators and glacial winds, someone wanted the place where they lay their head to feel soothing. As you settle deeper into your imagination, the cave becomes fuller, more alive. You hear the soft shifting of bodies adjusting their moss pads. You sense the tiny vibrations of movement as someone arranges a few stones into a kind of boundary, a marker of personal space. Cold air drifts lightly above the ground, and the thick bedding works as a barrier, a quiet guardian against the freezing stone. Experts sometimes debate how frequently these bedding layers were replaced. Some theories propose that groups refreshed them regularly to avoid pests and maintain comfort, while others suggest that replacements were only seasonal. You can picture both possibilities as you run your fingers through imaginary fronds of ancient moss. If nights grew harsher, perhaps thicker layers were added. If food was scarce and energy had to be conserved, perhaps the bedding was left as it was until spring made gathering easier. You stretch your hand toward the wall, feeling the faint texture of mineral buildup. Someone long ago might have leaned here, their shoulder resting exactly where yours is now. Maybe a parent settled their child onto a moss bed and whispered soft sounds to calm them. The idea of that moment lingers gently in your mind. Even in this harsh world, tiny gestures of comfort would have mattered deeply. Your senses drift into a kind of quiet wonder. The bedding may seem simple: moss, grasses, scraped earth. Yet these details reveal something essential about the endurance of Neanderthals. They refused to sleep directly on freezing stone. They found ways to soften their nights, ways to protect their muscles from constant strain, ways to make survival slightly more bearable through ingenuity rather than technology. You can feel the dignity in that choice. You shift again, imagining how the ground would warm slightly under a sleeping body. The heat would seep slowly through the plant layers. Perhaps a family lined up so their bedding merged into a continuous surface. This would allow warmth to circulate gently from one person to another. The idea curls around you like a faint echo of their lives. As you rise, the soft crunch of sand under your palms brings you back into the present. You glance toward the cave entrance again, the icy world waiting outside. and you understand why these small preparations mattered. Without bedding, rest would be impossible. Without rest, survival would dissolve. Your breath leaves your chest in a slow rhythm. The bedding, the scraped earth, the tucked places along the rock all form the quiet foundation of nights in a world that never softened its edges. And as the story deepens, you step forward, ready to discover how these ancient sleepers depended not only on their materials but also on each other's presence to make it through winter after winter. You step deeper into the cavern, and the darkness begins to feel warmer, simply because you imagine more bodies gathering here. The air changes its character when you picture a full clan settling in for the night. The cold is still present, but it softens at the edges, shaped by the simple reality that many bodies together create a tiny pocket of heat. You pause, and let that sensation bloom inside your mind. The presence of others warms the space more effectively than any tool available to these early people. You picture a cluster forming naturally, each person finding a place near familiar individuals. Children curl beside parents. Elders settle against the interior wall where cold drafts strain to reach. Adults lie close enough that their shoulders touch. Scientists often point out that Neanderthals had broad chests and strong limbs, making them excellent at retaining warmth. When several individuals rested close together, their combined heat made the cavern feel significantly more bearable. You sense that in your imagination now, the slow build of warmth in the air as dozens of breaths drift upward. Your footsteps grow quieter as you move across the floor. You imagine the whisper of bodies adjusting their positions on moss bedding. Someone shifts a hide wrap closer around their torso. Someone else murmurs a sleepy sound as they tuck a child closer. A researcher once proposed that these clusters might have followed a loose pattern based on age or responsibility. Perhaps those tasked with guarding the entrance slept slightly apart while family units nestled deeper inside. The details are uncertain, and interpretations vary, but you can see the logic unfolding naturally around you. You pause beside a narrow alcove and imagine a small child pressed between two adults, protected not just by arms, but by the shared warmth flowing from surrounding bodies. In cold environments, skin contact can be the difference between survival and exhaustion. Studies of modern cold-adapted groups highlight how communal sleeping arrangements reduce heat loss dramatically. You feel those truths settling in your awareness. There is a curious detail mentioned occasionally in discussions of prehistoric sleep. Some specialists think that long nights in cold caves may have encouraged Neanderthals to develop subtle cues for coordinated rest. You imagine someone giving a soft grunt that signals it is time to settle. Maybe a gentle touch on a shoulder. Maybe a simple shift in breathing rhythm that others subconsciously respond to. These cues would have helped preserve group heat and reduce restlessness. You stand still, close your eyes, and picture yourself lying among them. At first, the proximity feels unfamiliar to your modern habits. But as the cave air chills your skin, the thought of clustered warmth becomes deeply appealing. You feel a body on your left shift slightly, its heat radiating toward you. On your right, another sleeper inhales slowly, their breath warming the space between you. Over time, the cold becomes less punishing. The shared warmth creates a sense of calm that feels ancient and universal. Some researchers like to debate whether these clusters formed based on social bonds or purely on practicality. You imagine both factors weaving together. People tend to rest near those they trust. In a world without fire, trust becomes a source of heat. Perhaps siblings always slept side by side. Perhaps friends who hunted together rested near one another. Perhaps disputes temporarily reshaped the cluster until the cold forced reconciliation. You kneel, placing your palm on the ground, and you feel the imagined warmth rising. It is faint but consistent. Real bodies would have produced so much more heat than this. The key was staying close enough that the warmth pooled rather than escaped. You picture the entire chamber forming a living blanket, a breathing, shifting organism shaped by necessity. A small detail catches your mind as you imagine this scene. In some modern primate groups, communal sleeping has emotional effects as well as physical ones. It reduces stress, calms anxious individuals, and reinforces social bonds. You wonder whether Neanderthals experienced similar benefits. It is easy to imagine someone relaxing more fully when surrounded by familiar bodies. The slow, steady hum of shared sleep sounds like a natural lullaby. You shift your focus to the entrance of the cave. A single figure might be resting there lightly, perhaps the designated watcher for the first half of the night. This person would stay half awake, listening for predators, snow shifts, or hostile conditions. Their position slightly apart from the cluster makes sense. They need quick mobility more than deep warmth. Even so, when their turn ended, they would return to the group, pressing into the circle and absorbing the heat that welcomed them back. The warmth of group sleep unfolds in your mind like a quiet revelation. It reminds you that before technology, before tools, before anything resembling fire control became consistent, human ancestors already knew how to survive nights that seemed impossible. They used their bodies, their closeness, their instincts. The beauty of that simplicity moves through you like a soft current. You glance once more at the walls, imagining finger marks smudged into the stone over centuries. Families must have gathered here through countless winters, repeating the same movements, finding the same warmth, breathing the same chilled air. You imagine the tender moment when someone wrapped an arm around their sleeping partner, not out of romance but out of survival. That closeness held them through nights that would have defeated any solitary sleeper. Your breath drifts into the chilled air, and you feel the story drawing you forward. The circle of bodies fades gently behind you as you continue deeper into the ancient night, ready to see how clothing and hides would soon become their next shield against the freezing world. You walk deeper into the cavern, and imagine the air thickening with the scent of tanned hide and damp woolly fur. The cluster of bodies you left behind slowly fades from your thoughts, as you begin noticing how textured this cold world becomes once clothing enters the story. Your fingertips brush an imaginary hide tossed across the ground, and at once you feel the subtle give of softened skin that has been scraped, stretched, and treated with animal fat. Even without firelight, you sense how important these coverings were in the battle against winter. You picture early Neanderthals stepping into the cave after long hours outside, their shoulders wrapped in layers of shaggy hide. Some researchers often remind us that Neanderthals lived in climates where average winter temperatures could plunge far below freezing. Their bodies were built for endurance, but even the strongest lungs and broadest chests could not handle glacial air without some form of protection. So they draped themselves in the skins of reindeer, bison, or whatever large game they managed to bring down. These hides trapped warm air close to the skin and shielded them from icy winds. Your hands explore the imagined texture of one such garment. It is heavy, slightly oily, and faintly musky. You can almost feel the chill lingering on its outer surface from the journey home. Once inside the cave, the hide becomes a second wall of warmth. People fold it tightly around themselves, using the thickest parts near the neck and shoulders where heat loss is greatest. Some specialists suggest that early humans may have stacked hides at night, creating layers over their bodies, the same way we use quilts today. You imagine those layers rising and falling with slow breathing. There is a curious detail that comes up sometimes in discussions of prehistoric clothing. Traces of red ochre have been found on certain hide working tools, hinting that people may have decorated or treated skins with pigments. You picture someone rubbing a faint smear of color along the edge of a fur cloak, not for fashion but perhaps for ritual or even to help preserve the material. That small artistic impulse softens the harshness of this winter world. You let yourself sink deeper into the imagined sensations. A thick fur wrap settles around your shoulders. The inner surface is soft, almost plush. The outer side feels rough and weathered. As you move your arms, the fur produces a faint, rustling sound. You picture how these garments would have muffled movement, making nighttime activity sound softer, more hushed. In a cave full of sleepers, Every rustle blends into a comforting rhythm. Scholars occasionally discuss whether Neanderthals crafted more tailored pieces or simply draped hides over their bodies. Some propose that early sewing techniques developed earlier than once believed, possibly using sinew threads and bone needles. Others caution that direct evidence is rare and open to interpretation. You imagine both possibilities. A simple drape would work well enough for sleep. A more fitted piece might provide better protection for hunting. In either case, the material was precious, carefully curated from each animal. You kneel and envision a pile of drying hides stored near the rear wall. They carry the faint scent of smoke from distant periods when fire use became more stable, but in your present story, they are cured using colder techniques. Scraping tools made from stone would have thinned them. Fat would have been rubbed into the surface to make them pliable. The process would have taken hours, maybe days, each step guided by quiet experience rather than formal instruction. You picture a young member of the clan helping an elder stretch a newly scraped hide across a stone ledge. Their fingers trace long lines, smoothing wrinkles. The hide shines faintly in the dim light from the entrance. Even without modern tanning chemicals, fat and repeated working can soften skin into a flexible covering. You feel a sense of admiration rise in you. These people created functional clothing without fabric, thread, or metal tools. They shaped survival with determination. A particularly interesting observation that appears in some studies is the possibility that Neanderthal garments were layered in specific ways. Thick fur on the outside, softer inner skins next to the body. This layering acts almost like primitive insulation. You try to sense how that combination feels. Warmth builds quickly, even in the coldest air. Movement becomes slightly heavier, but the trade-off is safety. You imagine lying down to sleep with all these layers still on your body. Even if you remove the outermost pieces, the inner hides remain. You tuck one edge under your hip, fold the rest across your chest, and feel the weight pressing down like an anchor against the night. The fur traps your breath, turning cold air into gentle warmth. Over time, this heat spreads outward, until even the cave floor begins to feel less hostile. You listen to the imagined rustles around you. Someone adjusts their fur. Someone else rolls to the side, their hide sliding softly across the moss bedding. The sound becomes a tapestry, weaving warmth and movement into one steady pattern. In this world, clothing is not merely protection. It is comfort, identity, memory. Each hide carries the story of an animal hunted, a journey survived, a season endured. Your thoughts return to the entrance of the cave where icy wind whispers faintly. Without these garments, even one night outside would be unbearable. Inside, wrapped in fur and pressed against others, you feel the sharp edge of winter dulling. The cold still exists, but it no longer wins. You understand more clearly how these early humans survived without fire for so long. They used every tool nature offered, shaped it with skill, and trusted the warmth they created together. Your breath deepens, and you sense the narrative drifting forward toward the next challenge these ancient sleepers faced. The cold was only one part of the night. The air itself carried dangers if not managed carefully. And so, with the weight of fur still on your shoulders, you move gently toward the topic of airflow and the silent tricks that kept these caves livable. You step farther into the depth of the cave, feeling the air shift against your cheeks as you imagine a colder wind pushing through the entrance. Even wrapped in fur and surrounded by imagined sleepers, you cannot ignore the way the cave breathes. The space inhales and exhales as weather changes outside, sending invisible currents curling along stone corridors. You pause and feel that delicate flow pass around you. It is subtle, but in a world without fire, airflow becomes a silent factor that decides whether the night is safe or dangerous. You picture a Neanderthal stepping into this same chamber thousands of years ago, pausing exactly as you are now. They would angle their face slightly, letting their skin sense what their eyes cannot see. A surprising insight that researchers often highlight is that caves are not sealed places. They ventilate themselves through cracks, hidden shafts, and changes in pressure. For someone who slept here every night, these patterns would have been familiar, almost comforting. You move closer to the wall and crouch, placing your hand a few inches above the floor. The air is colder here. You stand and feel it become warmer near your chest. That simple difference tells you the cave has layers of airflow. Early humans would have sensed this too. They likely chose sleeping positions based on these invisible currents. A low draft could freeze toes. A high draft could chill faces. But the right pocket of still air would allow warmth to build. Some researchers suggest that Neanderthals took advantage of natural ventilation in caves to avoid condensation building up around their bedding. Without airflow, moisture from breath and bodies could settle on stone, forming slick frost that drained heat from anything it touched. You imagine someone brushing a hand across a wall each morning to test how damp it had become. If it felt too wet, perhaps they shifted the bedding to a better location that night. These were small adjustments, but vital ones. A curious detail found in certain cave studies is the presence of stones arranged in ways that seem to redirect airflow. Whether intentional or coincidental is still debated. You picture a low line of rocks forming a subtle barrier near the ground. Cold air flowing in from the entrance might hit those stones and slow down, keeping the sleeping area slightly warmer. Maybe someone learned this trick through experience, noticing how bodies slept more comfortably on the far side of a rocky ridge. You take a slow breath, listening to the imagined wind whispering near the entrance. The air carries faint scents, mineral dust, old moisture, and the ghost of snow drifting in from outside. The smell tells you another truth. Airflow matters not just for comfort but for safety. If too much cold pours into the sleeping area, the group risks hypothermia. If too little air moves, carbon dioxide from dozens of breaths could thicken in pockets. Even without fire, stale air can threaten life. Scholars sometimes discuss whether groups rotated sleeping positions to manage airflow challenges. You picture a scenario where one family claims a warmer pocket of still air during the harshest part of winter, then shifts outward again when conditions ease. The idea is simple, but its truth is appealing. In a world ruled by cold, fairness might look like a quiet exchange of sleeping spots. You step toward a narrow corridor at the back of the cave. The air here feels strangely still. You imagine someone testing these depths during storms, trying to find the place where cold winds fail to reach. Maybe this tight passage becomes the chosen sleeping zone for the smallest children. They would be tucked here where drafts cannot slip through. An older relative might guard the edge of the corridor, blocking any sudden gust with their body. You run your fingers along the stone and notice how certain curves funnel air. A hollow dip might collect cold air like a bowl. A raised ledge might act like a windbreak. These details form the quiet logic of cave living. People who slept here needed no scientific vocabulary to understand it. Their senses were sharper than words. Their nightly rituals shaped by instinct and repeated experience. You close your eyes and listen. The cave seems to hum softly, the way large spaces often do when touched by moving air. You imagine someone lying awake, listening carefully to that hum. If it grew louder, perhaps a storm was approaching. If it fell silent, maybe snow had sealed part of the entrance. These subtle clues helped guide decisions long before dawn. There is an intriguing discussion among cave specialists about whether early humans used hides or woven branches to partially block the entrance during deep winter nights. Not a full seal, just enough to slow incoming cold. The evidence is indirect, but the idea has weight. You picture someone lifting a heavy hide and hanging it near the entrance. The material flutters softly in the wind, creating a gentle barrier that tamps down drafts. Behind it, warmth gathers slowly, like a held breath. You step toward the imagined hide curtain and lift its edge with your fingers. The cold beyond is sharp, biting, unforgiving. You drop the hide and feel the stillness return. Inside this sheltered pocket, the air becomes friendlier. You understand why these early sleepers survived. They did not rely solely on their bodies or clothing. They read the cave, understood its moods, and shaped it into a partner in their nightly struggles. Your breath slows as you continue deeper in thought. The Neanderthals who slept here were not passive victims of winter. They worked with the environment, using stone and airflow to gain small victories over the cold. Each night, they assessed the currents, adjusted their bedding, and found the safest pockets of warmth. Even without fire, they created a delicate balance that kept entire clans alive. You look toward the darker chambers ahead. The air grows stiller, thicker, quieter. Here, the story nudges you forward again, ready to reveal how sleep itself changed with the rhythms of winter scarcity and long nights. You walk deeper into the imagined winter world, and the silence begins to feel heavier, as if the cave itself understands the weight of the season. Outside, food grows scarce. Inside, bodies slow down. You pause near a flattened patch of earth and picture the ancient families adjusting their sleep patterns as the cold months stretch endlessly ahead. Night in this world is not a brief pause, it is a season of its own. The darkness lasts far longer than you are used to, and it shapes every movement, every breath, every habit. You imagine standing outside the cave during the short, pale daylight hours. Snow crunches under your feet, and the sun hangs low, casting more shadow than warmth. Winter light is thin and fragile. By late afternoon, everything dims again. Early humans living in this climate had to shift their whole schedule to match the long span of darkness. Researchers often note that prehistoric peoples showed signs of seasonal rhythms in their daily activities. Body clocks responded to reduced sunlight, just like people today who feel sluggish in the darker months. You kneel beside the imagined bedding and listen to your own breath. The rhythm feels slower. You picture how Neanderthals during winter may have leaned into this natural slowing. Some experts suggest they might have slept longer, not in one continuous stretch, but in repeated phases, rising occasionally to adjust bedding or check the entrance, then sinking back into rest. The cold draws energy from the body, so conserving warmth through extended sleep becomes essential. Even now, when you imagine lying down in this chilled cave, your body instinctively wants stillness. A fascinating idea sometimes mentioned by specialists studying ancient populations is that nutritional scarcity influenced sleep. During winter, the diet changed dramatically. Fresh plants were nearly non-existent, and hunting became riskier due to deep snow. When food is hard to obtain, bodies adjust to conserve calories. You picture someone lying down after a meager evening meal, their stomach only half full, their body insisting on sleep to save energy. The entire group follows similar patterns, drifting into a quieter rhythm, as if winter has wrapped them in a heavy blanket. You settle against the wall and imagine the soft shuffle of people returning from a short winter forage. Perhaps they carried a few roots dug from frost-hardened soil, or scavenged remains left by predators. These tiny meals would not be enough to fuel constant activity. Over time, the group adapts, accepting that rest is as important as food. In this cold world, energy is a precious resource, not to be wasted. There is an unusual detail that sometimes appears in discussions about ancient survival. Some suggest that early humans may have intentionally reduced activity during the darkest months, almost like a mild seasonal dormancy. Not true hibernation, but a deliberate slowing of metabolism encouraged by longer sleep. Picture someone curling deeper into their bedding, their breath steady, their movements minimal. The cold outside encourages this surrender to slowness. Your fingers trace the cave floor as you picture a night in midwinter. The sky outside is black, the stars sharp as stone shards. Inside, a soft chorus of breathing fills the chamber. People sleep in clusters, but the clusters are quieter now. Even whispering takes effort. A young hunter who once roamed the plains with energy now moves with the exhaustion of short rations and biting wind. You imagine them lying down and falling asleep almost instantly, their body grateful for the chance to stop burning precious calories. Some specialists discuss whether winter foraging created predictable patterns. Perhaps the group ventured out only during certain hours, when light was strongest or when winds briefly softened. These predictable windows shaped when people slept. You imagine a pattern forming. Wake during the faint midday glow. Forage. Return by early dusk. Settle into sleep. Wake again briefly around the middle of the night. Adjust bedding. Listen for predators. Drift off once more. The cycle repeats, guided entirely by necessity. You pause and let your ears tune into the imagined soundscape. You hear soft rustles as someone shifts, maybe rearranging their hide covering, the muffled crunch of a body rolling onto its side, the faint sniff of someone with a winter cold. These noises feel steady, familiar, grounding. In a strange way, the longer nights make people feel closer, more dependent on each other. When food is limited, warmth and company become emotional nourishment. You picture a parent gently waking their teenage child to accompany them on a brief forage just before dawn. The child rubs their eyes, groggy from long sleep, but rises without complaint. The air outside bites instantly, punishing any exposed skin. But the routine is necessary. They search for anything edible. Roots under thin snow, a carcass left by wolves, dry berries clinging stubbornly to a bush. When they return, the rest of the group stirs. Their bodies still wrapped in furs, they share whatever small meal emerges from the hunt. There is a subtle question scholars often debate. How much did winter scarcity shape social bonds inside these small communities? Some suggest that hardship strengthened cooperation, while others argue that stress could have brought tension. You imagine both possibilities flickering through the chamber. One night, someone might offer their portion to a younger member. Another night, hunger sharpens tempers and a quiet disagreement darkens the air. These emotional currents move beneath the simple act of sleep. You lean against the wall, sensing how heavy the winter rhythm feels. In your mind, the sleepers around you breathe almost in unison. Each inhale becomes a soft note in a shared lullaby. These long nights must have created an unusual sense of time. Without fire, there is no flicker to mark the hours. Without clocks, there is no way to measure the passing moments. Instead, sleep becomes a fluid experience. People drift in and out of slumber as needed. Some wake to stretch numb limbs. Some adjust hides. Some simply remain in the dreamy edge between sleep and awareness. Your thoughts drift toward the sky outside the cave. Somewhere above the clouds, the sun moves along its tight winter arc, barely skimming the horizon before vanishing again. The cold deepens. But inside this cavern of ancient sleep, life continues. Day after day, night after night, early humans adapt to the rhythms of scarcity. Their sleep becomes a tool, a shield, a quiet solution to a world that demands endurance. You inhale deeply and let the imagined cold glide through you. The winter rhythm settles into your bones, lending you a strange calm. And as you rise from your imagined bedding, the story draws you forward once more, ready to explore how listening in the dark became a skill that kept these sleepers alive. You stay close to the wall as the cave narrows, and the darkness thickens until your ears become more useful than your eyes. In this world without firelight, hearing becomes the guardian of the night. You imagine yourself lying among the sleepers, wrapped in hides, warmth building slowly from the cluster of bodies around you. Yet even as drowsiness starts to pull you toward rest, a part of you remains alert. You listen the way Neanderthals once listened. Every tiny sound carries meaning. You focus on the faint hum of winter wind slipping past the entrance. It has a thin, reedy quality, almost like a distant whistle. Then you imagine another noise layered just beneath it, the soft crunch of snow under paws. You try to identify the creature that made it. A fox would move lightly. A wolf would push deeper into the snow, each step heavy. A cave lion would have a padding gait, soft yet powerful. The ancient world outside the cave crawls with predators, and your ears become your strongest defense. Researchers who study prehistoric environments often point out how vital auditory awareness was for humans living without artificial light. Darkness hides everything except sound. You imagine a Neanderthal lying on their side, eyes closed, listening for clues carried through the frozen night. A shifting branch could signal wind or a stalking cat. A distant roar might mark a territorial call. Even the faintest noise from above could hint at a rock loosened by ice. All of it mattered. You settle into the bedding and imagine being one of these listeners. Your breath slows, your eyelids droop, but your ears stay wide open. The cave amplifies certain tones in a strange way. When someone adjusts a hide on the far side of the chamber, the sound travels like a soft ripple. When a pebble falls near the entrance, it sounds sharper, brighter, almost urgent. You understand that the entire sleeping arrangement depends on these cues. If a noise breaks the pattern of night, someone must wake quickly. An interesting observation from some field researchers is that early human ear structures suggest robust hearing in the range where animal movements and vocalizations often occur. Whether this directly influenced survival remains a topic people like to debate, but the thought feels compelling as you lie there imagining yourself listening through the dark. You tilt your head slightly and imagine hearing the faint shuffle of fur outside the entrance. Is it prey or predator? You lean into the sound, letting your imagination sharpen it. Another noise drapes itself across the cave interior. A low rumble, distant yet distinct. It could be thunder far across the plains, or it might be the call of a large predator marking territory. You picture a single sleeper near the entrance lifting their head, eyes barely open, listening with practiced patience. If the sound continues or grows closer, they will shift their weight and give a small signal to the rest of the group. A quiet huff, a soft tap. Enough to warn, but not enough to startle. You begin to notice how layered the cave soundscape is. A drip of water from a stalactite taps the stone floor in rhythmic intervals. Farther back in the chamber, soft breathing forms a steady background tone. Occasionally, someone mutters through a dream, releasing a faint sound that echoes briefly before dissolving. Each of these familiar noises builds a pattern of normalcy. Anything that does not fit that pattern becomes a threat. You imagine a sudden break in the rhythm. Outside, a deep snort rushes through the air, followed by the scraping sound of claws on stone. The watchers at the entrance immediately freeze, listening. Their breaths pause. No one moves until the pattern becomes clear. Perhaps it is a curious bear sniffing near the cave mouth. Perhaps the animal wanders away. Perhaps it presses closer. These seconds stretch long in your imagination. There is a small but memorable detail that sometimes appears in discussions of ancient behavior. Some specialists believe that early humans could distinguish specific predators by sound alone, not just the species, but the individual animal, especially if it frequented the same territory. Imagine sleeping through a winter night and recognizing the familiar rumble of a prowling cat you have heard for months. Perhaps you know its patterns well enough to relax again when the sound fades in a certain direction. That kind of connection between human and environment feels almost instinctive. You shift your body slightly and imagine the cold air sneaking through the entrance. It carries scents and also carries sound. Every gust has its own voice. A strong blast whistles sharply along the stone. A softer draft murmurs like a sigh. These sounds help you understand what moves outside, even without seeing anything. In a world without fire, the night depends on these invisible clues. You picture someone lightly tapping another sleeper's shoulder. Not enough to wake them fully, just enough to adjust their position. Perhaps the shift helps block a draft. Perhaps it places a stronger listener near the edge of the group. These tiny gestures build a quiet language spoken entirely through touch and sound, a language that keeps everyone alive. Some specialists enjoy discussing whether Neanderthals developed distinctive nighttime communication sounds. Not words, but soft clicks, hums, or throat tones used to signal danger, reassurance, or simple acknowledgement. You imagine lying there, half asleep, hearing a low rumble from the watcher that means all is clear. The sound drifts across the chamber and settles the group like a lullaby. You listen again to the imagined outside. The night has shifted. The wind grows calmer. No heavy footsteps approach. The world seems to hold its breath for a moment, giving you space to rest. You sink a little deeper into your hide covering and feel the cave cradle you in its quiet body. As your breath steadies, you sense the next part of the story waiting. The night is not only for listening, it is also a time when roles shift and duties rotate. Someone must guard, someone must sleep, and the balance keeps danger at bay. You rise slowly from the bedding in your mind and move deeper into the ancient rhythm of shared vigilance. You settle near the imagined mouth of the cave, where cold air brushes lightly against your face and the night stretches outward like an endless sheet of black silk. The warmth of the clustered sleepers lingers behind you, but here at the threshold, the world feels sharper. You can almost sense why early Neanderthals appointed quiet guardians to rest in this zone. A night watch is not about staying fully awake. It is about resting lightly, sleeping in shallow waves, and being ready to stir at the first unusual sound. You lower yourself to the ground, wrapping your imagined hide tighter around your shoulders. From here, the breaths of the sleepers fade into a soft background hush. Before long, your eyelids begin to sag, but you train your ears on the distant open world. Researchers sometimes note that hunter-gatherer groups across many regions use rotating rest cycles rather than strict wakefulness. Rather than a single sentinel standing guard, several individuals lightly sleep in shifts, each drifting in and out of awareness. This pattern likely mirrors what happened here. No one can stay fully alert all night in this cold, yet no one ever truly sleeps deeply until dawn. You lean on your elbow and picture a young adult taking the first watch. Their eyes flutter closed for a few seconds at a time, then reopen as the wind shifts. They listen for footsteps, for breathing that does not belong to the group, for the scrape of claws, for anything that feels wrong. They do not need firelight to track danger. Their ears do most of the work. Their nose helps too, picking up scents drifting on the cold breeze. There is a quiet idea that some specialists discuss. Perhaps the watcher chose certain positions that aligned with natural acoustics inside the cave, allowing sound to travel more clearly to them. Some corners amplify distant noises, others muffle them completely. You imagine a watcher leaning slightly into one particular angle of rock, listening for far-off signals carried in by the wind. A small shift in posture might mean hearing the difference between a scavenging hyena and a prowling lion. You begin to feel what this position demands. Your body wants sleep, but your senses stay open. Your muscles relax, yet your mind stays tuned to the landscape outside. You hear the wind, a faint rustle, a shifting tone in the night. You strain to interpret it. For the watchers of ancient winters, these moments were routine. Their nights were made of attention and drifting rest, a rhythm that kept the group safe without exhausting any single individual. You imagine a gentle touch on your shoulder. The next watcher quietly crouches beside you. No words needed. You shift your body, sliding away from the entrance toward the warmer core of the sleeping group. They take your place, shoulders squared toward the darkness. You can see how these rotations become a nightly ritual. Each person carries a share of the burden. Each one watches for a time. This exchange builds trust and preserves energy. A curious point that sometimes emerges in discussions of ancient vigilance is the idea that watchers used subtle breathing cues to alert the others. Not a loud call, but a slight change in rhythm. If danger approached, their breath might quicken or catch. The sleepers closest to them would sense it subconsciously, stirring just enough to evaluate the threat. You picture a mother lightly pressing her child closer after hearing such a signal. No panic, no shouting, just a soft adjustment that shifts the entire cluster into readiness. As you imagine moving back toward the center of the cave, you feel how different it is from the watcher's position. The air is warmer, the sounds softer, the bodies here sleep more deeply. You lie down beside them and feel your own attention dissolve into drowsiness. Someone else now listens for danger. Someone else guards the thin doorway between the living space and the winter night. You roll onto your side, adjusting your hide so it fits snugly against your chin. The soft breathing of the group surrounds you like a shield. The steady rhythm assures you that everything is calm for the moment. You think of the watcher behind you, sitting in half light, their eyes reflecting faint stars from outside. The cold nips at their hands, but they hold position, knowing that warmth waits when their shift ends. Scholars often ponder whether watch rotations followed a predictable order or shifted based on circumstances. Perhaps hunters who were more familiar with predator behavior took the first hours. Perhaps elders took short, early shifts because their sleep was already light. Perhaps parents alternated based on their children's rest. It is easy to imagine these decisions happening silently, shaped by instinct and experience rather than spoken rules. You feel another wave of sleep tug at you. In your mind, you sense the watcher quietly rising, stretching their legs, and scanning the horizon. The wind shifts. The sound changes. For a moment, their shoulders tense. Then they relax. Whatever stirred outside has moved away. They remain alert, but no alarm is needed. That small moment of evaluation is the essence of their duty. You close your eyes and let the scene soften. The entrance of the cave becomes a dim memory. The distant noises fade. For now, the night is peaceful. The watch rotation continues, allowing each member of the group to rest deeply while still maintaining a thin line of awareness between them and the frozen world outside. And as your drowsy mind sinks deeper into warmth, the story nudges you toward the next question. What if these ancient sleepers sometimes drifted into a state even more mysterious than light sleep? What if winter invited a deeper kind of stillness? You move away from the cave entrance, letting the imagined cold fade as you step into a quieter corner where the air feels thicker, almost heavier. Something about this stillness stirs a strange thought. You sit down, rest your palms on the cool ground, and allow your mind to wander into one of the most intriguing possibilities ever floated about early humans. The idea that, during the harshest winters, Neanderthals might have slipped into a state that resembles a gentle, partial dormancy. Not true hibernation, not the deep winter sleep of bears or bats, but something softer, slower, and more human. You stretch out on the bedding and feel your breathing slow. The quiet presses against your skin. Outside, snow falls in thick, muffled sheets that bury sound. Days are short, nights unending. Food is scarce. Your body yearns for stillness. In these conditions, specialists sometimes propose that early hominins may have drifted into extended phases of low activity and long sleep. Not unconsciousness, not vulnerability, but a controlled surrender to the season. You imagine your body temperature dropping just a little, not dangerously, but enough to conserve calories. Your heartbeat slows into a calm rhythm. Your limbs feel heavy, relaxed, unwilling to move unless absolutely necessary. This idea often sparks lively debate among experts. Some argue that the metabolic adaptations required for such behavior would leave hints in skeletal remains. Others counter that evidence is subtle, difficult to interpret, and possibly lost to time. You rest your head back and feel the allure of the theory settling around you like a thick blanket. Picture a Neanderthal in midwinter. They curl into a tight ball, knees close to the chest, wrapped in thick hides. Their breath comes slow and steady. They remain aware enough to respond to danger, but their body stays in a deeply restful mode. They might sleep for long stretches, waking only briefly to adjust position, check on family members, or nibble on stored food. As you imagine this, you feel the heaviness of winter sinking into your own muscles. A small but intriguing detail sometimes brought up in this context involves bones found in certain prehistoric populations that show stress markers similar to those seen in animals that undergo seasonal dormancy. Whether this applies to Neanderthals is uncertain, but the possibility lingers deliciously on the edge of scientific imagination. You run your fingers along the cave floor, picturing ancient bodies resting here for hours, conserving every bit of energy. You inhale deeply, letting the air fill your lungs. Then you exhale slowly, imagining what it might feel like to drift into that quiet state. Not quite asleep, not fully awake, but resting in a twilight of consciousness where time stretches like soft clay. In such a state, hunger pains soften, the cold becomes less intrusive, and the mind drifts on gentle currents of awareness. You picture an entire group falling into this rhythm together. A parent wraps their child closely under a hide, both breathing slowly, both conserving warmth. Adults lie in clusters, shifting minimally. Elders, whose bodies crave warmth more intensely, are placed at the center of the group where shared heat is strongest. Movement becomes rare. Speech becomes softer. The cave falls into a peaceful hush, broken only by breathing and the occasional shifting of fur. This imagined winter dormancy raises another question often discussed in academic circles. How did dreams change during these long stretches of half-sleep? In deep winter, with minimal stimulation, the brain might drift into patterns shaped by hunger, cold, and memory. You imagine someone dreaming of summer grass brushing their legs, or the sound of a river rushing under warm sunlight. In this deep rest, dreams become nourishment of their own, offering a temporary escape from the frozen world. You curl your fingers slightly, imagining the delicate balance between this restful state and the need to stay alert. Even while drifting near hibernation, the watchers might wake at the slightest unusual sound. The group might reverse positions occasionally, allowing those near the entrance to retreat deeper into warmth. All of this happens quietly, instinctively, shaped by a shared understanding of survival. You lean back and imagine what it might feel like after many days of this slowed rhythm. Your body would feel heavy but preserved, like a flame turned low. Your energy saved for the rare moments when movement became necessary. Outside, storms tear at the mountains, winds howl across the plains, and predators roam freely. Yet inside, you and your group remain protected in this slow, restful winter trance. There is something deeply human about this imagined state. Not quite animal dormancy, not quite ordinary sleep, something between the two. A survival strategy born of harsh winters and scarce food, refined by experience and passed down through generations. You picture a parent teaching a child how to stay still, how to breathe slowly, how to let the cold pass over them without panic. You picture someone waking slightly, shifting an arm, checking if the hide covers their feet, then sinking back into the layered quiet. The cave smells faintly of fur and earth. Breathing rhythms overlap and merge. The cold air near the floor thickens, but the cluster above it remains warm. You feel your own imagined heartbeat slow as you settle deeper into the scene. Another thought surfaces, one researchers sometimes contemplate. Perhaps this winter sleep state made nighttime less frightening. If your mind drifts through long dreams, if your body stays still and warm, if the group breathes together, the passing hours might feel quicker, less brutal. Winter becomes something endured in shared quiet, rather than something fought moment by moment. You listen to the imagined quiet, a soft drip of water, a faint hum from the cave walls. The cold outside cannot reach you here, not entirely. Not while so many bodies share the warmth of this sheltered space. You feel your own breathing settle into an ancient pattern. The idea of partial dormancy may remain unproven, but as you sit in the imagined cave, it feels real. It feels logical. It feels deeply possible. And as your mind drifts gently to the next stage of this long winter story, you sense the fireless warmth shifting from sleep itself to the fuel that keeps the body alive from within. You rise slowly from the imagined near hibernation, your limbs heavy and your body moving as if wrapped in thick snow. The cluster of sleepers behind you shifts gently, a soft chorus of breath swelling and falling like waves in a dark sea. As you walk toward a shallow dip in the floor, you place your hand on your stomach and imagine the quiet burn happening deep inside you. Even without fire, even without steady meals, the human body has its own hidden blaze. It flickers in the form of stored fat and muscle, converted slowly into warmth through long, frozen nights. You kneel and feel the cool earth through your hide covering, Then you picture a Neanderthal settling in this same spot long before you. Their chest rises slowly. Their breath clouds the air. Their body works quietly, burning stored fuel to keep their core temperature steady. Specialists studying prehistoric physiology often highlight how robust Neanderthals were. Their bones thick, their muscles powerful, their body mass high. All of these traits help retain heat. A larger body stores more energy and loses warmth more slowly, providing a natural advantage in cold climates. You wrap your arms around yourself, imagining what it feels like to rely on internal heat as your primary defense. No glowing embers, no crackling branches, just your own metabolism, humming like a hidden hearth. Fat reserves become the key to survival. You picture the group gathering during autumn, consuming whatever high-calorie foods they could find. Marrow from long bones, fatty cuts from the flanks of large animals. Even dried meat or scavenged organs would help. These calories were not just fuel for movement, they were heat for winter. There is a subtle idea that sometimes appears in discussions of cold-adapted species. Bodies exposed to harsh temperatures often develop a thicker layer of subcutaneous fat, which not only insulates, but also offers a slow burn of energy when food becomes scarce. You imagine a Neanderthal child tugging at their hide wrap, their cheeks slightly rounder during early winter, their body prepared for the hunger months ahead. The adults might be lean from constant exertion, yet still carry enough mass to endure the coming cold. You picture yourself lying down again, rolling your shoulders under the weight of your hide cloak. Your breath becomes steady, and you imagine how internal heat radiates outward. It warms your belly first, then your chest, then your limbs. Even your fingertips hold onto a trace of warmth as long as you keep them tucked close. You realize how sleep itself helps preserve this internal fire. Movement burns calories too quickly. Stillness keeps the heat inside. Some experts enjoy exploring how diet shaped winter survival. High-fat foods act like an invisible layer of insulation, both inside and outside the body. You imagine a hunter returning with a rare winter kill. The group gathers around the carcass, carving out the richest parts with stone tools. They place chunks of fat into hide pouches, storing them for later nights. Even a few bites of preserved fat could provide enough energy to keep a heart beating warm through a long stretch of darkness. You run your fingers across the cave wall, tracing a shallow groove. Perhaps a family once leaned here, conserving energy during harsh months. Their faces coated with cold pink flush, their eyes half closed as they rested. Their bodies remained still for hours, letting metabolism do its quiet work. You picture their breaths rising like steam from a pot, each exhale feeding the warm air that pooled above the bedding. A curious detail that sometimes appears in metabolic studies is the possibility that ancient humans, including Neanderthals, experienced seasonal shifts in thyroid activity. This gland helps regulate warmth and energy. During cold months, the body might boost certain hormones to increase internal heat production. Whether this occurred in Neanderthals remains a matter of lively discussion, but imagining it helps you feel the biological wisdom embedded in these bodies. They knew winter not just through experience, but through chemistry. You settle deeper into the imagined space, holding your fur cloak close. Your body in this story behaves like a slow furnace. Every calorie becomes precious. Every layer of fat becomes a reservoir of warmth. Every heartbeat sustains the fireless flame carried through the coldest nights. You inhale deeply and feel the imagined burn inside your ribs. It is not a violent heat, not a roar, but a low glow, steady and patient. You imagine a parent touching their child's forehead, checking if they are warm enough. You picture an elder, adjusting their position to press closer to the heat of the group. You sense a slow, communal warmth building in the center of the cluster, the merging of individual internal fires creating a shared cocoon. A question sometimes raised by specialists is whether winter hunger changed behavior. Some propose that people moved less, spoke less, and even dreamed differently when calories were low. You imagine drifting off while your stomach works quietly on the faint remains of a meal. Dreams become gentle, simple, shaped by the need to stay calm and save energy. Perhaps you dream of sunlight on rivers or soft grass in spring. Perhaps you dream of distant animals fat with summer flesh. In this cave, the internal fire becomes the only source of warmth. It burns through the night, fueled by autumn meals, preserved fat, and the careful rationing of effort. Even when the wind outside slices through the mountains, inside the cavern, bodies glow with slow heat that cannot be seen but can be felt. As you rise again, you let the invisible warmth linger on your skin. The next challenge these ancient sleepers face waits beyond the entrance. To survive nights like these, they needed more than heat. They needed the skill to move through snow-covered landscapes in search of the next meal. And so the story guides you toward the frozen world outside, where each step becomes a test of endurance. You move toward the imagined cave entrance again, and the cold greets you like a living presence, brushing your cheeks, slipping around your ankles, curling under your hide coverings with sly fingers. The warmth of the group fades behind you. Now you step into the world that shaped every winter night. Snow stretches in all directions, pale and silent, broken only by wind-carved ridges and the faint tracks of animals that pass through before dawn. As you stand there, you understand that sleep without fire is not just about bedding or body heat. It depends on how you move through the frozen world each day, spending your strength wisely, preserving enough warmth to make it back to the cave alive. You imagine taking your first step into deep snow. Your foot sinks, not softly, but with a heavy plunge that demands effort. Your calf burns as you raise your leg again. That simple movement, repeated all day, steals heat from your body. Early Neanderthals living in these conditions learned how to move with careful rhythm, conserving energy. You picture their footprints arranged in deliberate patterns across the landscape. Wide, firm steps, angled routes that avoid wind-scoured areas. Paths chosen for efficiency rather than speed. Some specialists studying trackways in ancient sediment note that step width and gait reveal a surprising adaptability to snowdrifts and rough terrain. You lower your body slightly, imagining the stance of an experienced winter wanderer. Bent knees, weight distributed forward, hides wrapped tightly to prevent cold air from sneaking under the edges. These small techniques matter. Even dropping your arms too long could let warm blood drift away from your core. So you tuck your hands under your cloak, close to your chest, letting your own body heat keep them alive. A curious detail that sometimes appears in paleo-environment studies is the possibility that Neanderthals used natural features as guides through harsh winter landscapes. A line of exposed stones might signal a path where snow is shallow. The angle of a hillside might hint at sheltered routes carved by persistent winds. You picture yourself following these subtle signs as you step carefully through the thick white world. Every choice in direction is survival. You take another slow breath, feeling icy air pinch the inside of your nose. You imagine the pressure of cold settling into your teeth, your cheeks tightening with the chill. Your feet ache as you lift them from the snow. Even with fur wrap and hide boots, winter bites mercilessly. But your mind sharpens. Each step becomes intentional. You learn to judge the snow by sound. A soft crunch means fresh powder. A sharper crackle means older layers hardened by frost. A muffled, hollow thump might mean thin ice over a hidden puddle. Movement in this landscape becomes a lesson in instinct. You imagine a group traveling together at dawn. The tallest adults break the trail, pushing through the snow so the smaller bodies behind them can follow with less effort. Children step in the footprints left for them, conserving their precious energy. If someone stumbles, another hand reaches out, not just from kindness, but because the entire group needs every person strong enough to endure the night. Some specialists like to debate whether these winter journeys were brief daily circuits or longer treks lasting several days. You imagine both possibilities. On calm days, a small team might range far to scout for animal tracks or find exposed grass where herbivores grazed. On harsher days, they might stay close to the cave, following short loops before returning to rest. Each journey shapes how well they sleep. Come home exhausted, and your internal fire fades. Return with a careful balance of effort, and you have enough warmth left to endure the long hours of darkness. You shift your foot and imagine stepping into a deeper patch of snow. It rises to your thigh. You push through, feeling your breath puff faster. For early Neanderthals, this challenge happened daily. They knew how to lean into the drift, how to use gravity, how to angle their hips so the snow rolled off their hides. Anything to prevent the cold from slipping through gaps and chilling the skin. You stop at an imagined overlook. Below you, a narrow valley stretches gently toward the horizon. Wind flows through it like a steady river of air. Snow here lies flatter, thinner. This would be an ideal route home. You imagine a group choosing it instinctively, letting the wind do part of the work. The breeze clears snow from the path, leaving firmer footing. That simple choice saves calories, which later become warmth during sleep. You crouch, brush your fingers across the icy ground, and imagine the smell of snow, a clean, sharp scent that stings your nose. You hear the faint, rhythmic crunch of your own steps. You picture the group moving in single file to preserve energy. Their breath hangs in clouds behind them, trailing like ghostly threads. There is an intriguing idea that occasionally surfaces in paleoanthropology discussions. Winter movement may have shaped body mechanics in ways that carried into nighttime posture. After hours of leaning into wind and trudging through drifts, the body naturally curls tight when lying down, saving heat. Wrap your legs inward, tuck arms close, hunch slightly. This compact posture appears in many cold-adapted mammals, and imagining Neanderthals imitating it feels not only possible but natural. You picture returning to the cave after such a journey. Your feet numb, your shoulders trembling slightly from exertion. As you step inside, the stillness feels like a warm drink. The air is cold, but it lacks the brutality of the outside world. Your body relaxes in stages. First the legs, then the hands, then the chest. You remove your outer hide, letting the trapped heat cling to your skin before it dissipates. You settle into the bedding, curling instinctively, and feel warmth grow again as the group gathers. The contrast between snow travel and cave sleep becomes sharp in your mind. Outside, each step drains your fire. Inside, each breath restores it slowly. You close your eyes and picture snow still falling outside, erasing your tracks. The cave now feels safer because you understand the effort it takes to reach it. Survival in this world depends on how you move through the cold, as much as how you sleep in it. And as you lie back against the stone, letting your breath settle into an ancient rhythm, you feel the next part of the story waiting. Even inside the cave, winter sometimes pushes too hard, and shelters must be strengthened or repaired against fierce storms. You return slowly to the imagined shelter, brushing loose snow from your hides as the cave mouth glows faintly with the pale light of an approaching storm. The air has changed. It carries a warning, a cold pressure that settles into your bones even before the first gust hits. You step through the entrance and feel wind swirl inside, scattering bits of moss, tugging at loose fur, slipping icy fingers into every gap in the stone. In moments like this, sleep becomes impossible unless the shelter is reinforced. Winter does not politely wait outside. It tries to enter. You crouch near the threshold, imagining the early Neanderthals reacting with quiet precision. No frantic movements, no shouting, just practiced actions repeated through countless winters. A few adults stand, shake off their stiffness, and move toward the entrance. Others gather materials stored from earlier days, dry branches, withered slabs of bark, worn hides stiff with frost. These pieces are not for warmth, they are for structure. You picture one person wedging a branch into a natural crack in the cave wall, creating a small frame. Another leans a slab of bark against it. Someone else drags a bundle of hardened grasses to fill the gaps. The materials scrape and rustle, producing coarse sounds that echo slightly in the cavern. Researchers studying ancient shelters often remark that caves were not simply used as found. People modified them, subtly and repeatedly. They blocked drafts, shaped entrances, repaired weak points. These repairs left no grand architectural remains, only tiny hints: a relocated stone, a flattened patch of earth, a discarded bundle of plant fiber. You run your hand along the ground and imagine a line of stones being pushed toward the entrance. Each stone is heavy, cold, and awkward, but when placed correctly, they disrupt the wind. You see someone rolling the largest stone with their palms, grunting softly, anchoring it in a shallow groove. The storm wind hits the entrance again, this time swirling upward instead of cutting straight into the sleeping area. That simple adjustment means the difference between a bitter night and a survivable one. A curious thought from some shelter researchers comes to mind. They propose that animal skins stretched across cave mouths served not only as insulation but also as wind diffusers. You imagine a thick hide being lifted, its fur rippling as the storm breathes against it. When secured by stones at the bottom and branches at the top, it becomes a soft barrier, not a full wall, but a trembling curtain. Wind presses into it, loses force, and slips upward before entering the cave. The hide flaps lightly, a rhythmic thud that blends with the sound of distant thunder. You stand close to the entrance and picture yourself holding one edge of that hide, while others secure the opposite side. Cold needles of snow sting your hands. Your breath forms thick clouds. Your arms shake from the effort. Yet the moment the hide settles into place, the cave transforms, the air becomes stiller. The deep interior feels insulated, embraced by quiet. You watch as someone kneels to press grasses into gaps between stones. Another person checks the upper ledge where snow might blow in. A child gathers stray twigs into a small pile that can serve as reinforcement if needed. These actions are not complicated, but together they create a patchwork of protection. In this world, perfection is not necessary. What matters is reducing the wind just enough to keep the sleepers warm. Some specialists like to discuss whether Neanderthals used snow itself as a building material. You imagine someone packing snow against the outside walls, letting it freeze into a crust. Snow, after all, can act as insulation when compacted properly. The idea feels logical as you picture the storm intensifying outside. A fresh layer of snow pressed against the cave entrance could muffle the wind further, turning the storm's fury into a protective blanket. Inside the shelter, the changes become immediately noticeable. The floor no longer trembles with gusts. The air calms. Sleepers stir, not from fear, but from the shifting sounds. You hear the muted flutter of the hide curtain, the faint rattle of branches, a soft hum as wind threads through the outer stones. These sounds become a strange lullaby, familiar and reassuring. They tell you that the storm is fierce, but you are sheltered. You move deeper into the cave and settle onto the bedding. The storm outside roars suddenly, sending a deep vibration through the stone. But most of the wind is now diffused. Only a gentle, chilled draft reaches you. You pull your hide tighter and feel warmth gathering again around your chest. You picture an elder checking the entrance one last time before sleeping. They run their hand along the anchored stones. They tug gently on the hide covering. They lean their weight against the branch frame to ensure it holds. Their movements are economical, shaped by decades of winter survival. Once satisfied, they lower themselves beside the others and let their eyes close. A quiet question often discussed in shelter studies rises to your mind. How often did these repairs need to be made? Some think storms forced nightly adjustments. Others suggest most caves retained their shielding structures for weeks at a time. You imagine both possibilities as the storm rages on. In harsh winters, vigilance becomes routine. In calmer seasons, maintenance slows. You listen to the storm again and feel the cave resist it. The shelter holds. The group breathes calmly. The bedding warms. Inside this fortified space, rest becomes possible once more. Even without fire, the combination of stone, hide, plant fiber, and human effort weaves a protective cocoon against nature's fiercest moods. As you lie back and let the storm's muffled roar fade into background noise, the story draws you onward. Winter is brutal, but the mind needs peace too. And so you drift into the quieter realm of small rituals and calming habits that soothe ancient sleepers before they close their eyes. You settle deeper into the cave, letting the echoes of the storm soften into a low rumble far behind you. The shelter is secure, the wind has been tamed, the bedding is arranged. Now the night shifts into a gentler phase, the quiet space where minds settle before sleep. Even in a world without fire, without soft beds or warm lamps, there are small habits that bring comfort. You lower yourself onto the mossy layer and imagine the subtle rituals Neanderthals might have practiced to soothe themselves before surrendering to rest. You close your eyes and picture someone smoothing the fur on their hide cloak, running their palm over the same patch again and again. A simple, repetitive motion. Maybe it warms the hand. Maybe it calms the nerves. Maybe it marks the end of the day. Specialists who study ancient behavior often point out that soothing gestures appear across many species. Grooming, stroking, tapping. These small movements relax the body and focus the mind. You imagine an elder leaning against a rock wall, their fingers lazily tracing a familiar groove they carved unintentionally over the years. You shift your position and feel the stone behind you. It is cool, but not unfriendly. You imagine someone tapping the wall gently with 2 fingers, listening to the soft echo as if confirming that the cave is alive and watching over them. A faint rhythm forms. Perhaps they do it nightly. Perhaps it is a childhood habit carried into adulthood. The cave absorbs these gestures as patiently as it holds their warmth. A curious idea sometimes mentioned in discussions of prehistoric life is that ritual and comfort do not always look like ceremony. Sometimes they are the tiniest actions. Reordering a few pebbles near the bedding, stroking a child's hair in slow lines, pressing a palm onto the earth to feel its steady cold. These motions become anchors in the chaotic world outside. You picture a parent humming softly, the tune barely audible, just enough for the closest sleepers to feel the vibration more than hear it. You imagine yourself inhaling deeply, letting your breath fill your lungs, then releasing it in a long, slow exhale. This simple act becomes a ritual too. The body responds to slow breathing with calmness. You picture members of the group lying quietly, their breathing patterns slowly aligning as they prepare for rest, their chests rising and falling like gentle waves on a lake, creating a shared rhythm that melts tension. Some specialists explore whether Neanderthals had calming nighttime gestures connected to their environment. Perhaps they ran their fingers across smooth stones collected earlier in the day. Maybe they kept a particular object near their bedding, a bone with worn edges, a polished pebble, a shell carried from a distant river. Not tools, not weapons, little treasures of texture and shape. You imagine someone rubbing a stone between their palms, feeling the cool smoothness soothe their mind. You shift slightly, adjusting your hide cloak the way they might. The sensation of tucking material around your hips and shoulders becomes a comforting routine. The small tug ties the end of the day to the beginning of night. The storm outside hisses lightly, but you focus on the warmth building under the hide and the steady breath of the group around you. In this imagined setting, you watch as a child curls closer to a parent. The parent places a hand on the child's back and leaves it there, heavy and reassuring. The child responds with a soft sigh. This, too, is a ritual. These simple touches create security. They signal that danger is far away for the moment. Even adults seek similar reassurance. One sleeper presses their foot lightly against another's leg in a quiet gesture of connection. There is an interesting perspective offered by some researchers who analyze social behavior. Even without language as complex as ours, shared nighttime gestures likely played a role in emotional bonding. A soft grunt of reassurance, a gentle exhale, a slow pat on a shoulder. These quiet sounds communicated safety the same way a lullaby does now. You imagine the cave filled not with silence, but with small, comforting noises that feel like warmth in the dark. You lean back and imagine someone stretching their arms overhead, loosening muscles stiff from long travel. Another turns onto their opposite side, pulling their hides closer. Someone else shifts the moss bedding to remove a small pebble that pokes their hip. These tiny adjustments form a nightly ritual, as familiar as fluffing a pillow or smoothing a blanket. The cave grows quieter. You hear the occasional drip of water in the distance, a faint sniff from someone settling in, a soft rustle of fur. The storm continues, but the shelter's new barrier muffles it into a gentle backdrop. With each small movement, the group sinks deeper into calm. A question that sometimes arises among scholars is whether early humans created small patterns with their hands in the dirt or moss while preparing for sleep. Maybe they traced circles. Maybe they lined up tiny stones. Perhaps these actions soothed the mind like drawing shapes before drifting off. You picture yourself doing the same, brushing your fingers gently through the soft bedding and forming faint arcs in the earth. You close your eyes again. The imagined room glows faintly with the pale reflection of snow outside. The air smells of fur, earth, and storm wind softened by hide curtains. The soothing rituals performed by each member of the group blend together, filling the cave with an atmosphere of quiet readiness for rest. This peaceful transition from wakefulness to sleep becomes as essential to survival as warmth itself. As the last of these small gestures fade into stillness, you sense the story shifting once more. Beneath your hands lies the earth that preserves clues about these ancient nights. And soon, you will follow those clues to understand what traces remain of the way they truly slept. You shift your weight on the mossy bedding and let your hand drift across the cave floor, brushing against tiny grains of sediment that have settled here through centuries. In this imagined moment, you feel the past pressing gently upward, inviting you to uncover the quiet secrets it left behind. Long after the sleepers vanished, the traces of their nights remained in the earth. And now you picture yourself moving through time like a patient observer, walking beside archaeologists who sift through ancient clues with fingertips as careful as your own. You kneel and imagine lowering a small digging tool into a thin layer of sediment. The dirt is cool, finely packed, and laced with tiny fragments of plant fibers. These fibers are fragile, so delicate they crumble when handled too roughly. Yet they speak volumes. Specialists studying prehistoric bedding often find compressions in the soil where vegetation once lay. These subtle depressions reveal where bodies rested, how often bedding was replaced, and even whether the materials were layered. You run your thumb across the imagined plant fibers, feeling their whispery texture. Even after thousands of years, they share the story of how people softened their sleeping places. You reach farther and picture something unusual, a slanted patch of earth that contains faint impressions shaped by repeated pressure. Maybe hips pressed here most often. Maybe a child slept curled tightly beside an adult, leaving two overlapping hollows. These patterns tell you where warmth collected each night. In a cave with no fire, warmth leaves marks. The ground remembers. A small detail occasionally discussed among field researchers catches your attention. In some caves, there are traces of pulverized herbs mixed into the bedding. Perhaps these were chosen for their pleasant scent. Perhaps they repelled insects. You imagine touching a faint dusting of ancient leaves, still faintly aromatic if you let your imagination sharpen the senses. Their chemical traces linger in soil samples today, tiny signatures of care and intention. You sit back and imagine turning toward a darker section of the cavern where long-forgotten objects rest. A piece of worked stone, a flattened bone, a fragile wooden fragment. These tools may not be directly related to sleep, but they hint at the activities that shape daily life before rest. A cutting tool discarded near the bedding might have been used to scrape hides just before the group settled in. A smooth pebble with one polished side might have been rubbed during quiet moments, calming anxious minds. Each artifact becomes a faint echo of the routines that led into the night. Another thought from archaeological studies enters your mind. The spacing of objects around bedding often reveals social patterns. If belongings cluster close to certain sleeping spots, It suggests particular individuals preferred those areas. Perhaps elders or caregivers kept useful items nearby for easy access during long, dark nights. You imagine a small pile of animal sinew and worn flakes placed within arm's reach of someone who repaired hides during evening hours. You crouch lower and run your palms across the stone wall. There, you imagine faint scratches, not deliberate carvings, but marks left by repeated contact, shoulders brushing the wall, fingertips tracing the same familiar line night after night. These subtle abrasions accumulate slowly over generations. They shape the personality of the cave itself. In some real sites, archaeologists find patches of rock polished smooth by countless touches. You imagine one such spot glowing softly in the dim light, warm with memory. You trace the imagined scratches gently and let your thoughts drift toward the larger fragments researchers sometimes uncover. Pieces of charred material, bones of small animals, shattered stone flakes. Even though your story takes place in a time before reliable fire-making, sporadic traces of ancient flames sometimes appear in layers that came later. You kneel and imagine discovering a small lens of blackened earth from a different era. It does not belong to the fireless nights you are exploring, but its presence reminds you of how many cycles of human life filled this cave. Another topic specialists enjoy debating concerns the arrangement of bedding materials. Some layers show signs of being replaced frequently, as if cleanliness mattered even in this stark world. Others reveal mixtures of old and new plant fibers, suggesting hurried repairs or desperate layering during storms. You imagine brushing aside a layer of earth to reveal patches of crushed grass mixed with finer leaves. The mixture hints at improvisation, at adaptability, at comfort shaped by necessity. You shift your position again and imagine discovering fossilized footprints near the bedding zone, deep impressions made by heavy adults, lighter, smaller ones belonging to children. These frozen steps in ancient soil show who moved where during the evening. Perhaps a child wandered in circles before settling down. Perhaps an adult paced the entrance before lying near the wall. You picture these steps like faint constellations, mapping nighttime habits of people who never knew you would one day imagine them. There is also the question, raised by several researchers, of why certain caves contain layers of soft plant bedding while others do not. Some suggest these variations reflect differing cultural practices. Others argue that materials simply decomposed in some sites and survived in others. You feel the uncertainty settle gently around you. Even with tools and knowledge, the past always guards part of its mystery. You reach forward, brushing your fingertips along the stone once more. The cave feels like a living archive. Every tiny fragment carries a story, a strand of grass, a shard of bone, a worn patch of earth. Together, they reveal the invisible patterns that kept families warm in the dark. As you rise, the imagined shadows shift around you. The ancient night deepens. You step back from the traces and feel the story ready to move towards something more tender. After all, winter nights were not lived by adults alone. Children breathed this cold air too. They slept in these beds. They nested within the warmth of their caregivers. And now their small, vulnerable presence draws you gently into the next part of the journey. You take a slow breath and let the imagined cave shift in your mind, becoming softer around the edges as you picture the youngest members of the group tucked safely inside. Winter is harsh for everyone, but for children, it is a thin line between survival and danger. You kneel beside a small hollow in the bedding and imagine a tiny shape curled into it, wrapped in layers of fur so thick that only the faint outline of a nose peeks out. The air here smells faintly of warm breath, hide oil, and the soft musk of sleeping bodies. You place your palm on the bedding and imagine the weight of a small hand settling into yours. Early Neanderthal children grew quickly, their bodies sturdy and compact, but they were still vulnerable to cold in ways adults could manage better. Their caregivers knew this instinctively. Specialists who study skeletal development note that Neanderthal infants and children had strong bone growth, suggesting attentive care and steady protection. You picture a parent adjusting a hide around a child's shoulders, tugging it gently until no draft can slip inside. You shift a little and feel the imagined warmth rising from the central cluster of sleepers. Children were usually placed at the heart of this formation, shielded by adult bodies on all sides. When winter tightened its grip, these protective arrangements became even more significant. You imagine two adults forming a bracket around a child, their backs curved inward, trapping warm air like a living cocoon. The child breathes softly, their breath mixing with the warmth of the adults, creating a small bubble of comfort in the vast cold. A detail sometimes discussed by specialists touches on how children were relocated during the night if drafts grew stronger. You picture an older sibling waking slightly, noticing cold on the child's cheek, and nudging them toward a warmer spot without a word. Perhaps the parent shifts too, extending an arm or draping a spare hide across the little body. These movements are instinctive, almost dreamlike, shaped by endless winter nights. You imagine sitting nearby, listening to the tiny noises that children make in their sleep, a soft murmur, a quiet sigh, the quick flutter of breath from a dream. These sounds feel tender in the dark. They remind you that even in a world of predators and storms, small moments of gentleness shaped each night. Some researchers examining wear patterns on fossils have proposed that Neanderthal children were carried often, especially during winter travel, to conserve their energy. You picture a parent bundling a child tightly against their chest during daytime journeys through snow. The child sleeps under layers of fur, warmed by the adult's breath and heartbeat. When the group returns to the cave, the child remains tucked in the wrap until the bedding is ready. That sense of constant closeness would carry into nighttime too. You reach toward the imagined stone wall and picture faint red ochre marks left behind by tiny fingers. Whether decorative or accidental, such traces hint that children interacted with their surroundings even in winter. You imagine them pressing hands into softened moss, drawing lines beside their bedding, or tapping the wall lightly as a habit before falling asleep. These small gestures deepen your sense of their presence. You shift your position again and imagine the role of elders in childcare. An older family member might lie near the children, offering warmth and vigilance. Their sleep is light, their ears trained by decades of living through winter nights. If a child stirs with discomfort, the elder responds first, rolling a little closer or adjusting a hide covering. This quiet partnership between generations supports the group in ways that leave no direct evidence, yet feel profoundly real. Another topic specialists like to discuss involves how illness was handled among cold-adapted groups. A child with a fever or cough would need even more warmth than usual. You imagine an ailing child placed at the absolute center of the cluster. Adults form a circle around them, creating a pocket of elevated temperature. Perhaps someone hums gently to calm them. Perhaps another holds a piece of dried plant near their nose, hoping its scent brings comfort. These small acts of care become essential when winter turns unforgiving. You lean closer to the imagined child and picture their breathing slowing into deep sleep. Their cheeks are flushed, not from warmth but from cold that touched them earlier. A parent strokes their forehead, checking for chill or dampness. The gesture is simple, timeless. It could belong to any era. The cave becomes a cradle during moments like this, holding generations inside its stony ribs. You take another breath and feel the cave around you grow warmer in your imagination. The bodies radiate heat, the hides hold it, the bedding insulates it. The presence of children transforms the space completely. Adults sleep lightly because they must. Children sleep deeply because they can. Their tiny sounds fill the cave with a softness that contrasts sharply with the world outside, where predators roam and storms roar. There is a gentle question that often surfaces in discussions of ancient caregiving. How did Neanderthal lullabies sound, if they existed? Perhaps they were low hums shaped by breath rather than words. Maybe rhythmic tapping on a stone served as a calming pulse. You imagine a parent humming softly, their chest vibrating, the sound drifting through the hides and settling the child's breath into a slower rhythm. As you rise slightly, the picture of the child remains vivid, curled tightly, wrapped carefully, guarded on all sides, sleeping through a night colder than anything you have ever known. This tender image softens the harshness of the ancient world and deepens your understanding of how communities survived without fire. They relied not only on tools and hides, but on each other. You turn your gaze toward the deeper dark of the cave. The storm continues outside, muffled by stone. The sleepers breathe steadily. The children rest safely at the center of it all. And as you step gently away from their quiet warmth, the story guides you toward the next essential element of winter survival. Not warmth this time, but sound. The soundscape of glacial nights, where every echo becomes a guide. You move quietly away from the cluster of children and let the cave widen around you, opening into a chamber where the sound changes in subtle, fascinating ways. You pause, letting your ears adjust. In this world without firelight, sound becomes the map, the clock, the weather report, and sometimes even the comfort that replaces warmth. You close your eyes and breathe slowly as the ancient soundscape gathers itself around you like a soft, cold cloak. The first thing you notice is the distant cracking of ice outside. It echoes faintly, as though the mountain itself is shifting its weight. The noise rolls through the darkness, deep and resonant, almost musical in its slow rise and fall. Researchers studying glacial environments often mention that ice does not simply sit quietly. It grumbles and splits, sighs and pops as temperatures change. You imagine a Neanderthal resting on the cave floor, hearing these sounds and knowing instinctively which ones signal danger and which ones mean nothing more than the glacier stretching its ancient limbs. You take a few steps forward and feel a slight change in air pressure. A new sound arrives, carried by the wind. A distant howl rises, thin and sharp, then fades into the snow-muffled night. Wolves, or something larger. You tilt your head, imagining how early humans would have passed that sound. They could not see the predators, but they could measure them through tone. A lone wolf's call sounds hesitant, testing. A pack's chorus is layered, broad, unsettling. Even without language, this distinction shapes how a watcher reacts. Another sound enters the chamber, quieter this time. Dripping water. A single drop hits the stone floor in a slow rhythm. Plink, plink, plink. You move closer and feel how the drip forms a small pool against the rock. This tiny sound may seem mundane, but in a cave shelter it is information. The steady drip tells you ice is melting somewhere above. Perhaps the storm is easing. Perhaps a new crack has formed. Specialists who explore ancient caves often note that water rhythms act like natural clocks. When dripping accelerates, temperature rises outside. When it slows, the world freezes harder. You settle onto the floor and let these layered sounds wash over you. Breathing, dripping, wind, distant predators, the gentle creak of hide curtains shifting with air pressure. These sounds merge into a tapestry. For someone trying to sleep, they become familiar companions. But anything out of place would stand out like a spark in darkness. You run your fingers along the wall and notice how certain surfaces reflect sound differently. Some corners amplify it, others swallow it, turning sharp noises into gentle murmurs. In real caves, acoustics vary wildly. Some specialists even suggest that early humans selected sleeping spots partly based on how the stone shaped sound. A slight echo might feel comforting. A hollow boom might feel threatening. You imagine someone lying close to a wall that vibrates gently when wind rushes past the entrance. The vibration becomes a lullaby, a physical reminder that the world outside is alive but distant. A curious thought sometimes raised by researchers is that snowstorms create unique audio textures. When snow falls heavily, the world becomes hushed. Even predators move silently. Early humans resting inside a cave would know instantly when a storm began because the soundscape collapses into a thick, padded quiet. You mimic this now, closing your eyes and imagining all external noise fading until only the internal sounds remain: steady breaths, shifting hides, an occasional sigh. This quiet can be calming, but it can also be eerie, warning that visibility outside is nearly zero. You tilt your head again. Another sound appears, soft and low, the rhythmic grinding of a distant herbivore pushing its way through frozen vegetation. That faint rumble carries into the cave like a heartbeat from the earth. Perhaps a woolly rhinoceros, perhaps a steppe bison. Such sounds would tell the group where to search for food once dawn arrived. Sleeping bodies, even half dreaming, recognize these clues. You imagine yourself reclining against a stone outcrop, listening to the breath of the sleeper beside you. The sound is slow, deep, and warm. You feel comfort settle into your chest. In ancient nights, these shared breaths were reminders that no one faced the cold alone. One person breathing too fast might rouse concern. One person breathing irregularly might signal illness. Within the cave, breath itself becomes a form of communication. Another sound draws your attention: the faint but unmistakable scrabble of claws on frozen rock outside. Not close, not alarming, just present. The group remains still, trusting the watchers. A curious idea some specialists mention is that people who slept closer to the entrance could differentiate between scavengers and predators by the patterns of their movement. Scavengers walk erratically. Predators move with slow intent. You imagine lying half asleep, listening to a creature pass by and understanding from sound alone whether danger is real or simply passing through the dark. You rise slowly and let your hand trail along the cave ceiling. You feel nothing, of course, but your imagination fills in fine vibrations from the wind. The roof hums lightly. These tones blend with the deeper rumble of the storm. You notice how layered the sounds are, how they overlap without merging, creating depth and space. In this environment, sleep and wakefulness merge too. Light sleepers hover just above dreaming, tuned to the soundscape the way modern people tune into background hums from distant traffic or ticking clocks. You take one last breath and let the entire chorus settle into your bones. This ancient audio world is not empty. It is intricate. It guides every decision, shapes every instinct, and wraps every sleeper in a cocoon of awareness. And as you turn from the shimmering darkness of the sound-filled chamber, the story gently carries you toward what comes next: the long wanderings of nomadic life and the ever-shifting places where these ancient families laid their heads. You leave the sound-filled chamber behind and drift toward the imagined entrance, where the world opens again into wide plains buried beneath winter light. The air stings your cheeks, sharp and honest. You pull your hides closer and picture the countless journeys that shaped Neanderthal life. They were not cave dwellers in a fixed sense. They were wanderers, following herds, climate shifts, and seasonal abundance. Their sleep was not tied to one shelter. It traveled with them, adapting to valleys, cliffs, riverbeds, and temporary hide-covered nooks carved out of snow. You step outside and imagine the crunch beneath your feet as you begin to walk through a shallow dawn. The sun is a pale disk rising behind thin clouds, offering light but little warmth. You picture a line of figures stretched across the snowy plain, each wrapped in thick hides, moving steadily with practiced rhythm. The group migrates not for luxury, but for survival. Herds move, water sources freeze or thaw, storms reshape terrain, and so families adapt by shifting their sleeping grounds again and again. Specialists who study migration patterns often point to layered evidence: repeated occupations of certain caves, abandoned sites reoccupied centuries later, and clusters of stone tools spread across wide territories. These hints paint a picture of movement, not chaos. The nomadic pattern likely followed well-known routes formed over generations. You imagine yourself stepping into their footprints, following faint depressions preserved in your mind more than in the snow. You walk a little farther and picture the group stopping for the day in a narrow ravine, where stone ledges offer shelter from wind. Not a deep cave this time, just a natural overhang. You imagine adults clearing snow from the ground, brushing it aside to reveal firmer earth beneath. Someone gathers evergreen branches to create quick bedding. Another shakes out hides that stiffened during the walk, draping them over the branches. A child presses their hands together for warmth, eyes half closed from exhaustion. In this world, sleeping arrangements shift constantly. Some nights, the group finds a shallow cave that cradles them gently. Other nights, they settle near boulders that block wind. Sometimes they huddle among dense shrubs or in the lee of a hill where snow forms natural walls. Each shelter is temporary, yet the nightly routine stays familiar. A gentle idea often discussed by researchers is that nomadic groups developed a mental map of safe resting spots across their territory. You picture an elder pointing toward a distant ridge, indicating a sheltered hollow beyond it. Perhaps their grandparents slept there. Perhaps that hollow has been used every winter for generations. Migration does not erase memory. It enriches it. You sit under the imagined overhang, adjusting your hide with a tug, and watch as the group settles in. They align their bodies in familiar clusters, children placed at the center, elders tucked into naturally shielded spots. The bedding is thinner than in a cave, but it still offers a layer against the frozen earth. You listen to the soft rustle of hides as everyone makes small adjustments. The sound reminds you of gentle waves slipping against a shore. Another topic that sometimes surfaces in discussions of nomadic sleep is the way groups balanced vigilance with mobility. Traveling exposes families to unfamiliar animals and unknown terrain, so sleep becomes lighter, more fragmented. You imagine one person lying close to the edge of the overhang, resting lightly, waking at every shift of wind. Behind them, others sleep more deeply, but still respond to subtle cues. The group functions like a living organism whose senses never fully shut off. You take a slow breath and imagine the night unfolding. Stars gather above, stretching across the sky like powdered frost. The cold deepens, but the group remains stable, wrapped in fur and pressed close together. Migratory life trains the body to accept new sleeping places without fear. As long as familiar voices and breaths are near, the ground beneath can be stone, earth, moss, or snow. A curious thought that some specialists consider is whether nomadic patterns influenced posture during sleep. On uneven ground or near sloping rock, sleepers might adopt curled positions or lean against each other for balance, creating a shared structure of limbs and hides. You imagine lying between two adults, one shoulder pressed against stone, the other cushioned by a companion's arm. The posture feels natural in winter, conserving both warmth and stability. The group's adaptability becomes even clearer as you picture a sudden shift in weather. Snow thickens, the wind grows violent. Without a cave to shield them, the family quickly adjusts. Someone pulls a large hide across the open side of the overhang, anchoring it with stones. Others gather branches, pulling them close to reinforce the barrier. In moments, the temporary camp transforms into a sturdy pocket of warmth. Even in a place they occupied just hours ago, they know how to turn raw landscape into shelter. You imagine lying down now, hearing the storm begin outside. The hide barrier flutters softly, tapping against the overhang like a slow heartbeat. Bodies shift around you. The bedding warms under shared weight. The rhythm of sleep begins. It is not the deep rest of a permanent cave, but it is enough. As your mind lingers in this scene, you notice something tender. A child curls into a parent's side, clinging tightly. The parent presses a hand gently against their back. A soft hum vibrates in the dark. These small gestures remind you that even in constant motion, comfort follows them. Nomadic life shapes every breath, every muscle, every night of rest. Sleep becomes fluid, responsive, and deeply tied to the land. And as you rise from this temporary camp in your imagination, brushing frost from your legs, the story calls you onward again. Because survival in winter is not only about cold or distance, illness comes too, and when it does, the group must find warmth in new ways. You step back under the imagined overhang, letting the storm wind slip across your shoulders. as you turn your thoughts to a deeper, quieter challenge of ancient winter life: sickness. In a world without medicine, without steady food, without firelight to warm fevered skin, an illness during the coldest months becomes a threat as real as any predator. You kneel beside the bedding and imagine the soft, uneven rhythm of someone's breathing. It is shallower than the others, a little faster, carrying a hint of strain. Your hand hovers above the imagined figure, and you feel the weight of responsibility settle over the entire group. You picture an adult lying curled inside a heavy hide, shivering despite the warmth around them. Their skin feels cold and damp. Their breaths come in thin wisps. In this harsh world, even a mild infection forces the group to adjust its routines. You imagine several family members gathering around the sick person, not panicking, but shifting positions instinctively. They draw closer. They press their bodies lightly against the weakened one. Their combined warmth becomes a healing tool. Specialists who study bone markers in ancient remains often note signs of healed injuries and prolonged illnesses, suggesting that Neanderthals cared for their sick more consistently than once assumed. Someone with a broken limb survived long enough to mend. Someone with chronic conditions received enough support to keep living. These clues suggest strong social bonds. You let that truth fill the cavern of your imagination. The group's warmth and watchfulness keep the sick alive. You lower yourself next to the imagined patient and feel how the bedding has been adjusted. Moss is thicker here. Hides are layered more carefully. The ground beneath has been cleared of cold pockets. A small pit nearby might hold dried plant matter that was once used for comfort or scent. Tiny fragments discovered in real shelters hint that herbs were sometimes present, though whether they were medicinal or simply pleasant remains uncertain. You imagine lifting the edge of a hide to check the person's chest. Their breathing is shallow but steady. A caregiver sits close, one hand resting near the patient's shoulder, ready to shift them if chills begin. You can almost feel the silent communication moving through the group. No words needed, just glances, just touch. A curious idea occasionally discussed by specialists is that warmth itself may have been viewed as a form of healing long before any other method existed. You picture two family members lying on either side of the sick person, their legs and arms placed to trap heat around the vulnerable body. Their breaths mingle, their hides overlap. Tiny adjustments are made through the night. Someone drapes an extra layer of fur over the patient's chest. Another tucks bedding closer around their hips. These gestures happen quietly, shaped by instinct and experience. You imagine the patient waking briefly, blinking at the dim outlines of familiar faces. A caregiver offers a tiny piece of dried meat or a snow-softened root. The taste is bland, but it offers strength. The patient chews slowly, their teeth chattering lightly. You picture the caregiver rubbing the patient's shoulders with warm hands, trying to stimulate circulation. There is tenderness here, grounded in necessity but also in affection. Some specialists like to debate whether Neanderthal groups temporarily slowed their travel when someone was ill. Perhaps they delayed a migration until the patient gained enough strength to walk. Perhaps they carried the person on a hide stretcher. You imagine a small team stepping outside to scout conditions, whispering soft breaths into the frigid air as they weigh the choice to move or stay. Their decision affects everyone's survival, yet compassion remains as much a guide as caution. You turn your attention to the patient's face. Their eyes flutter closed again. Sweat beads faintly on their skin despite the cold. You imagine wiping it gently with a strip of hide or moss. The act is simple, but soothing. In the dim chamber, other sleepers shift slightly, drawn into lighter slumber by the sounds of illness. Even dreams adjust to the rhythm of the sick. A gentle detail sometimes noted in archaeological contexts is that sleeping groups often clustered even more tightly when someone was unwell. You picture a ring of bodies pressing close, forming a warm shield around the patient. Children are moved toward the warmer inner circle, and adults anchor the edges. The patient lies in the safest place, surrounded on every side by human warmth. This arrangement reduces drafts, stabilizes breathing, and helps the body fight whatever sickness has taken hold. You rest your hand on the floor and imagine the long hours that follow. The storm outside continues, but the group remains focused inward. Someone checks the entrance occasionally. Someone else adjusts the bedding under the patient. A watcher listens with extra attention, attuned to both predators and the soft coughs behind them. The night becomes a shared vigil. Another thought sometimes discussed by specialists concerns the emotional bonds that form in times of illness. Caring for the sick strengthens trust within the group. You imagine siblings sharing tasks. One keeps the child quiet. Another brings snow to cool a fevered forehead. An elder shares knowledge of past winters, offering guidance on how to position the patient for easier breathing. These moments shape the resilience of the entire community. You listen to the imagined breathing of the patient again. It steadies a little. Their body relaxes under the combined warmth. You picture them drifting into a deeper sleep, wrapped in hides and human closeness. The caregivers remain alert, even as their own eyes blur with fatigue. They check the patient's limbs, adjusting posture to prevent numbness from the cold. They watch the rhythm of breath for any change. You glance toward the cave entrance where icy wind continues to push in faint gusts. In this world, sickness and cold intertwine. A simple illness can become deadly if warmth is lost. But here, wrapped inside the living shelter of the group, the patient has a chance. You imagine days passing in this rhythm. The group stays close. Food is rationed carefully. Someone tends to the bedding daily, brushing off moisture and replacing plant fibers. The patient improves slowly, regaining strength breath by breath. When they finally sit upright, supported by a caregiver's arm, the group's relief is palpable, though expressed in subtle movements, not grand gestures. A nod, a gentle shoulder touch, a shared exhale. The healing process transforms the space. The cave feels brighter, though no light has shifted. The bedding feels warmer, though the temperature is unchanged. You realize how deeply communal care shaped winter survival. Without fire, without medicine, their greatest resource was each other. As the patient finally drifts into stable sleep, the storm outside begins to ease. The air grows quieter. The group takes deeper breaths. And the story pulls you onward, toward the quieter inner world of winter nights where dreams, memories, and hunger mix to shape the sleeping mind. You sit near the recovering sleeper for a moment longer, listening to their breath settle into a steady rhythm. Then you stand and walk deeper into the imagined darkness of the cave, until you reach a quiet hollow where the air feels unusually still. Here, where bodies rest and hunger gnaws softly beneath the ribs, you sense the place where dreams begin to form. In these long, fireless winters, the mind becomes a quiet landscape shaped by cold, scarcity, memory, and the soft murmurs of sleeping companions. You lower yourself onto the bedding and imagine your stomach tightening slightly with that familiar winter emptiness. Food has been scarce for days. The last meal was small, just enough to sustain warmth. You can almost feel the hollow ache beneath your ribs. That ache follows you into sleep, threading itself into your thoughts. Specialists studying the psychology of hunger often note that when the body lacks food, dreams grow vivid, strange, and deeply sensory. You imagine a Neanderthal settling their head onto a bundle of moss, eyelids fluttering as hunger shapes the first images of the night. Your mind drifts toward the taste of food, fresh meat seared by nothing but sunlight, warm marrow slipping from a bone, sweet berries from a summer bush. You imagine these flavors appearing in dreams, rich and indulgent. A starving mind paints feasts more clearly than reality ever could. Perhaps the sleeper beside you dreams of a river filled with fish. Perhaps someone else dreams of a mammoth herd grazing under warm skies. These imagined scenes offer comfort in a winter world where real abundance comes rarely. You lie perfectly still, feeling your breath rise and fall. Then another thought filters in: memories. Not the crisp memories of your modern life, but the ancient, instinctive ones carried through generations. Researchers sometimes propose that strong seasonal patterns shape long-term memory. You imagine a Neanderthal, dreaming of places visited many winters before, a valley filled with tall grass, a cliff where birds nested, a distant shelter handed down in stories. Dreams become a map, a storage system for critical knowledge. Even in sleep, the mind rehearses the routes that lead to survival. A faint murmur echoes from another sleeper. Maybe it is someone speaking softly through a dream. Maybe it is a deep exhale touched by longing. You picture a family member turning in their bedding, their face relaxed, their body warm from nearby sleepers. Their mind drifts into a different scene, perhaps one shaped by the sounds of the present night. A dripping rhythm becomes a river in their dream. A rumble of wind becomes the footsteps of migrating animals. The line between waking and dreaming blurs in the long winter dark. You roll slightly onto your side and imagine how the cold breath of the cave shapes your sleep. Dreams might be shorter when your body stirs to adjust bedding. They might be deeper when insulation is good. Some researchers suggest that fragmented sleep cycles could create multiple rounds of dreaming each night. You picture someone waking, shifting closer to the cluster, then drifting immediately into another dream filled with swirling snowfields or the soft voices of companions. Your mind drifts again toward hunger. The ache sharpens slightly. In your imagination, you reach for a dried piece of root stored near the bedding, a small nibble, just enough to calm the stomach. You imagine doing this in the ancient world too, waking briefly to chew something soft, letting the flavor travel through the dark before sleep pulls you back under. These tiny midnight snacks would ease fear, soothe children, and help the body maintain warmth through dreams. A tender detail sometimes raised by specialists studying modern forager groups is that shared dreaming becomes part of social bonding. People discuss dreams in the morning, interpreting them as warnings or hopes. You imagine early humans doing something similar. A hunter might wake and tell another sleeper they dreamed of following a herd toward a southern valley. A caregiver might say they dreamed of storm clouds clearing. Whether believed or not, these exchanges help shape decisions for the day. You feel your own breath warming the hide near your face. The rhythm of sleeping bodies blends into a soft harmony. That harmony becomes part of the dream environment too. You imagine someone dreaming of walking through tall grass while hearing the real breathing of their companions behind the dream sounds. The mind merges both worlds. Another thought occasionally raised in academic circles concerns the emotional tone of winter dreams. When food is scarce and storms loom, dreams may carry traces of fear, longing, or determination. You picture a sleeper dreaming of running from a predator. Their fingers twitch, their breath sharpens briefly. Another sleeper dreams of sunlight on water, their face softening in the glow. Dreams in this cold world become a place where the mind processes danger and preserves hope. You shift and listen as the imagined cave breathes around you. Dreams also help store memories of tools, hunting techniques, and places to forage. You imagine someone dreaming of shaping a stone tool, the rhythmic tapping echoing faintly in their mind. Another dreams of tracking an animal across mixed terrain. These dreams might refine skills unconsciously, preparing the body for challenges ahead. You close your eyes fully now, sinking into the quiet. Hunger murmurs. Warmth gathers around you. The drip of water marks time in slow intervals. The dream world stretches wide and strange. In this ancient night, dreams are not simply images. They are survival guides, emotional guardians, and companions for the long winter hours. You rest your hand on the bedding and imagine waking slowly at dawn. A faint glow touches the cave walls. Others stir. Some blink sleep from their eyes. A few whisper their dreams into the cold air. You feel the weight of shared sleep pressing in gentle waves around you. And as you rise, brushing moss from your palms, the story leads you forward toward the scattered objects found near ancient bedding. Strange items whose meanings flicker between tool, comfort, ritual, and mystery. You rise slowly from the imagined bedding, brushing the moss from your hands as the echoes of distant dreams fade. Ahead, the cave deepens into a shadowed alcove where the air feels older, still carrying faint traces of lives lived long before you. You walk toward that darkness and begin to notice small objects scattered along the ground. Some are familiar in shape, others feel strangely out of place. All of them whisper stories that archaeologists still puzzle over. Not weapons, not tools meant for hunting, not debris of daily chores. Instead, these odd items rest beside ancient sleeping spots like silent companions. You crouch near a smoothed pebble lying in a shallow depression. It fits perfectly into your palm. Cool, rounded, gentle. Specialists studying these stones often remark that they appear deliberately selected, not just random fragments. Their surfaces are sometimes polished by repeated handling. You close your fingers around the pebble and imagine someone doing this night after night, rubbing it slowly to calm their mind before drifting into slumber. Maybe it eased anxiety. Maybe it helped them focus on the rhythm of their breath. Maybe it simply felt pleasant in the darkness. You set the pebble down and notice a piece of bone nearby. Not from a meal, not sharpened into a tool. Instead, the bone looks smooth along one edge and bears tiny scratches that seem almost decorative. You imagine a teenager carving those lines absent-mindedly during quiet moments, using the object as a tactile distraction during long winter evenings. Or perhaps a child kept it as a treasure, tucked beside their bedding for comfort in the giant, echoing cave. A curious thought often raised by specialists is that these objects may have carried meaning only understood within the group. Perhaps certain stones were believed to hold good fortune. Perhaps particular bones reminded sleepers of past hunts. The cave floor becomes a quiet archive of these intimate attachments, each item holding emotional weight that cannot be measured by modern tools. You reach toward a thin wooden stick, softened by age. It lies close to the bedding area, not near the cooking zone or tool crafting spots. Its wood fibers are worn smooth near the center, as if fingers pressed there again and again. You imagine someone tracing the grooves of this stick while lying awake on a winter night, using the motion to soothe their thoughts. Or perhaps it belonged to a child who tapped it softly against the ground, creating a tiny rhythm that comforted them. Your gaze drifts farther, and you spot an arrangement of small stones in a gentle curve. Not a wall, not a barrier, something more deliberate, almost decorative. Some researchers suggest these small alignments could mark personal spaces within a communal sleeping zone. Not strict boundaries, just gentle reminders of where someone preferred to lie. You imagine a quiet ritual of placing a stone at the foot of one's bedding before sleep, reinforcing a sense of place in a shifting world. Another interesting idea from archaeological discussions is that certain objects near bedding might have been linked to seasonal rituals. Perhaps a bone was placed near a sleeper during illness, as a charm for recovery. Perhaps a feather found near the entrance was kept as a symbol of safe travel. These possibilities cannot be proven, but as you picture the cave filled with quiet breath and soft rustles, the thought of symbolic objects feels entirely natural. You move a little deeper into the alcove and notice faint red pigment smeared across a stone. It is subtle, barely visible in the dim light of your imagination. Researchers sometimes find similar traces near sleeping areas, hinting that small amounts of pigment might have been used on bodies or objects. You imagine someone pressing a pigment-coated fingertip against a stone to mark a comforting shape. A dot, a line, a curve. Perhaps it meant nothing. Perhaps it meant everything. You kneel again and close your eyes, letting your hand drift across the floor. You feel an uneven texture beneath your fingertips, a fragment of antler, carved into a slight bend. The end is smoothed, as though held in the palm many times. This object could have been a tool, but lying here near bedding, you sense a different purpose. Maybe it was a fidget piece, something to hold while settling into sleep. Maybe a parent placed it beside a child to soothe them. Maybe it was the ancient equivalent of a comfort item, carried during migrations and kept close in long winter nights. A question often explored by researchers lingers in the air. Did these objects act as memory anchors? Did touching a familiar stone before sleep help someone recall where they came from, or where the group planned to migrate next? You imagine a traveler holding a treasured object that carried the feel of a former shelter. These subtle connections anchor the psyche during harsh winters. You turn your head toward a darker corner, where a cluster of small bones lies arranged in a gentle arc. They are not food scraps. They are too clean, too deliberately placed. Some specialists think arrangements like these might reflect early symbolic thinking. Others believe they simply shaped airflow or kept bedding edges from slipping. You picture someone using these bones to mark where bedding should begin, a small act of order in the midst of cold chaos. As you sit back, the cave seems to hum with the presence of these objects. Each piece near the sleeping area carries quiet emotion, comfort, memory, habit, ritual. You sense how these items reflect the inner world of early humans as clearly as tools reflect their outer struggles. You touch the smooth pebble again, letting its imagined coolness settle into your palm. The object feels timeless. You picture it passing through many hands, each person leaving a faint trace. Someone may have held it while whispering reassurance to a restless child. Someone may have gripped it when storms raged. Someone may have carried it across a migration route as a reminder of a beloved shelter. You place the pebble back in its hollow, exactly where you found it, and rise slowly. Around you, the bedding rustles softly in the shared breath of the sleepers. The objects rest quietly, holding their meanings in silence. And as the cave darkens again in your imagination, the story draws you outward from this intimate chamber and toward the larger world of neighboring groups whose shared shelters sometimes held both tension and warmth. You rise from the alcove, where the quiet objects rest, and begin walking toward the imagined light at the entrance of the cave. As you move, the air shifts in subtle layers, carrying new scents and faint vibrations you did not notice before. You pause, sensing that this shelter was not always home to one family alone. Winter often pressed groups into the same protected spaces, drawing neighboring clans together in uneasy but necessary alliances. You sit near the mouth of the chamber and picture figures emerging from the snow-filled world outside, their shapes dark against the pale air, their breaths drifting in slow clouds as they approach. You imagine two small groups meeting at the cave entrance. Tension hangs between them at first. They carry familiar smells of hide and cold, yet their faces are not the ones your group sees each night. Their shoulders hold a different rhythm. Their steps fall with a different cadence. Specialists who study shared habitation sites sometimes point to layers of overlapping occupation, hinting that caves were visited intermittently by different groups who may have tolerated one another during the darkest days of winter. You imagine yourself standing between these families, feeling both caution and relief blending in the air. The newcomers pause, waiting for a sign, a small gesture, a nod, a lowered gaze that signals permission. No formal words, just instinct and understanding between humans shaped by the same cold. Your group retreats slightly, allowing space. A mother pulls her child closer. A hunter steps forward, shoulders squared but not aggressive. The tension thins. The newcomers move carefully inside. You watch them settle into a less used section of the cave. Their bedding is sparse, carried in bundles of dried grass and woven branches. They shake off snow, unwrap hides, and begin arranging their sleeping circle. The cave fills with new sounds, unfamiliar breathing rhythms, the soft clatter of their tools, a faint whistle from someone clearing icy air from their throat. These sounds blend with your own group's rhythm, creating a layered harmony that feels strange at first, then slowly becomes familiar. A delicate thought that often appears in discussions of prehistoric social life is that alliances between groups were fluid, sometimes warm, sometimes cautious, sometimes brief. You picture the adults exchanging quiet glances, gauging trust. A young child from the newcomer's side inches toward your group's sleeping area, eyes curious. A caregiver extends a hide gently toward them, not touching, but inviting warmth. The child hesitates, then accepts. That tiny moment softens the space immediately. You kneel near the bedding and imagine the subtle shift in sleeping arrangements when two groups share one shelter. Boundaries appear naturally. Your group lies closest to the walls they know. The newcomers gather near the draftier areas at first. But as the nights pass, people drift slightly. A hunter from one group settles closer to a familiar cousin from the other. A child curls beside someone whose scent feels safe. The lines between the groups blur a little, shaped by cold and comfort rather than strict hierarchy. A curious observation sometimes mentioned by researchers is that shared spaces might have encouraged quiet exchanges of knowledge. Not formal lessons, but simple gestures. One person adjusts another's hide, showing how to fold it tighter. Another shares dried plant fibers that repel insects. A newcomer demonstrates a bedding trick learned from their own travels. You imagine these teachings happening as people prepare for sleep, whispering softly while the cave darkens. You lie down on the bedding and listen to the mixed breath of both groups. The sound is denser now, warmer, richer. More bodies mean more shared heat, and the cave benefits immediately. A newcomer shifts closer to the center, seeking warmth. Someone from your group adjusts their position, making space. The air fills with a sense of cooperation born from necessity. Yet tension remains beneath the surface. You imagine two individuals glancing at each other too sharply. Perhaps a past conflict flickers in memory. Perhaps the fear of scarce resources creates subtle friction. Those tensions travel through posture and silence, but they do not erupt. Everyone understands that harmony is needed for survival. The night is long, the cold unyielding, and predators roam freely outside. Sleep, require peace. Another idea occasionally explored in academic discussions is that winter alliances may have led to exchanges that shaped population dynamics. A young adult might find companionship with someone from the visiting group. Bonds may form quietly, with shared glances during nighttime chores or whispered exchanges while tending bedding. You imagine such connections taking root in the cave's half-light, unnoticed but impactful. You watch as an elder from the newcomers' group settles into a hollow near the wall. Their breathing is uneven, marked by age. A member of your group shifts closer, offering warmth without words. The elder relaxes. These silent acts hold more meaning than any artifact can reveal. They reflect empathy born from shared hardship. As the night deepens, the cave becomes a shared sanctuary. Two groups rest in intertwined patterns, bodies curled under hides, breaths creating a rhythm that echoes softly off the stone walls. The storm outside continues its distant rumble, but the cave holds firm, filled with layers of warmth, tension, comfort, and the quiet mystery of human connection. You rise slowly, imagining how dawn might feel with two groups stirring together, stretching limbs, brushing off frost, and preparing to part ways or continue traveling together for a few more days. Alliances shift like snow under wind, but the memory of shared warmth remains. And as you step away from the imagined shelter, the story guides you toward the immense scale of their endurance. Not just one winter, not just one generation, but hundreds of thousands of years shaped by cold and resilience. You walk deeper into the vast chamber of your imagination, feeling the weight of time pressing down like slow, settling snow. The cave around you seems to breathe with memories older than mountains, older than the paths carved by glaciers. You pause in the dimness and sense the long chain of winters stretching far behind you. One Neanderthal life is impressive. 10 generations surviving the cold is remarkable. But now you stand inside the idea of 400,000 winters. The scale is almost impossible to grasp, yet you feel it settling softly into your thoughts like drifting frost. You kneel and touch the ground, imagining prints upon prints layered over centuries. The first figures to step here lived in a world barely recognizable. Their bodies were powerful, their limbs sturdy, their chests broad, their faces shaped for cold air. Specialists studying ancient remains often remark on the durability of Neanderthal bones, built to endure relentless climates. Over thousands of years, their physical traits did not just appear, they sharpened, strengthened, refined. The cold sculpted them patiently, winter after winter. You picture an early ancestor stepping into a cave like this one, rubbing their hands together, feeling an instinctive pull toward the warm center of a cluster. Then you imagine a later generation, slightly better at crafting hides, more practiced at layering bedding, more aware of airflow tricks. Slowly, almost invisibly, these skills accumulate. Knowledge is not written but carried in muscle memory and quiet observation. One child watches an elder check the entrance for drafts. Another learns how to shape snow into a protective wall. These lessons sink into the rhythm of daily life. You shift your weight and feel how the air in the cave thickens as your imagination reaches across tens of thousands of years. Entire ice age cycles come and go. Some winters are mild. Others carve deep scars into the land. Neanderthals endure each wave. The shelters change. Some groups move south when glaciers advance. Others remain, adapting to colder winds. Bones found across Europe reflect this long dance between climate and survival. A thought from evolutionary studies drifts into your mind. Gradual adaptation is rarely dramatic. It is subtle. Over many winters, small changes accumulate. Bodies become slightly more efficient at retaining warmth. Skin responds differently to the cold. Muscle patterns shift to support strenuous snow travel. You imagine a line of descendants standing side by side through time, their silhouettes shifting slightly with each passing millennia, shaped quietly by frozen nights. You walk farther and picture a young Neanderthal from a later era sleeping with more refined bedding than their distant ancestor. Their hide coverings are thicker, stitched in places, shaped better to their body. Their sense of airflow is keener. Their instinct for safe shelter is sharper. These improvements were never considered inventions. They were simply life, passing from one generation to the next. Another idea occasionally discussed by specialists is that social structures also adapted across ages. As families survived harsh winters together, cooperation became deeply embedded in their way of living. You imagine early groups learning slowly that clustering infants near elders saves energy. Later generations refine these patterns. The center of the sleeping arrangement becomes warmer, safer, and more carefully managed. These internal structures form an anchor across centuries. You press your hand to the wall and imagine thousands of fingers having done the same. Over time, stone becomes polished where people rest their heads night after night. These worn places, barely visible, mark where ancient bodies leaned and dreamed. You picture the earliest inhabitants sleeping against rougher surfaces, while later ones rest against smoother walls shaped by generations of contact. Even the cave changes over time, softened by touch. Some specialists ponder whether Neanderthal mobility patterns shifted as glacial cycles altered landscapes. You imagine families learning new routes, adjusting migration patterns, or returning to old shelters when climates warmed. Over many millennia, certain caves become woven into their lineage. Perhaps a grandmother once slept here. Perhaps a great ancestor carved a line on the stone. The connection to place deepens across time, even as groups shift in and out. You move to the edge of the imagined bedding and picture a line of sleepers spanning centuries. Children in thick hides, adults curled in protective arcs, elders with deep-set eyes. Across ages, their habits remain recognizable. The way they tuck their knees, the way they place stones to block drafts, the way they hum softly to restless children. These threads weave into a tapestry of resilience maintained across uncountable winters. A quiet idea sometimes explored by researchers suggests that long-term cold exposure might have shaped not just bodies but minds. Perhaps patience became a necessity. Perhaps calm acceptance of darkness and scarcity became a cultural trait. You imagine the mental endurance needed to face 6 months of deep winter each year. Over generations, these traits would have become part of their identity. You sit down and let the weight of this endurance settle over you. 400,000 winters. Long before fire was controlled consistently. Long before stone tools became refined. Long before your distant ancestors painted walls or built shelters. Through all those years, Neanderthals survived night after night with nothing but their bodies, hides, group warmth, quiet rituals, and deep intuition. The cave begins to feel timeless. You picture winter storms sweeping across continents that no longer exist in the same shape. You imagine mammoths moving across frozen plains. You sense the deep hum of glaciers grinding through valleys. Through all these monumental shifts, families return to places like this, curled together against cold stone, letting their bodies carry them through another night. You press your palm flat against the floor once more, as if touching the echo of thousands who rested before you. Their story is not one of dramatic inventions. It is one of persistence, adaptation, incremental skill, quiet intelligence passed from parent to child. And as you rise again, the story gently carries you toward a turning point in this long timeline, a moment when the dark nights begin to change shape. Not because the cold relents, but because light begins to flicker at last. You take a slow step deeper into the imagined cave, and something shifts in the air. It is subtle at first, like a whisper brushing the edge of your mind. For thousands upon thousands of years in this story, you have lived through nights lit only by starlight and instinct. But now, as you picture the passage of time, a faint glow trembles against the stone. Not a roaring fire, not a blazing hearth, just the earliest flickering hint of something new. You settle onto the bedding, and imagine how this moment must have felt to those who had known only darkness. You rest your hand on the cool floor, and picture a later generation of Neanderthals who began encountering fire more frequently, not yet creating it at will, but capturing flames found in lightning-struck trees, volcanic edges, or smouldering branches carried from the distant plains. Specialists who examine archaeological sites note that sporadic fire use appears long before widespread mastery. That means some nights glowed faintly while others stayed cold and dark. You imagine this irregular rhythm spreading mystery and fascination through the sleeping group. You sit a little closer to the imagined glow, watching its faint shimmer dance across the walls. Even a tiny flame shifts the emotional texture of the cave. Shadows appear, long and strange, stretching over the stone like living spirits. For a group that had survived winter after winter without fire, this new light might feel both miraculous and unsettling. You picture a child reaching toward the glow, their breath catching softly. A caregiver gently pulls the hand back, knowing the danger but also sensing the power. Some specialists discuss the possibility that early fire adoption happens slowly, with long periods of forgetting and rediscovering. You imagine a night when a wandering group stumbled upon a branch still smoking after a storm. They carried it cautiously for hours, trying to keep the ember alive. Maybe it lasted until dusk. Maybe it went out. Over time, they learned small tricks, sheltering the ember under hides, burying it in warm ash, feeding it bits of dry grass to coax a faint flame. The nights changed, but not all at once. You lean forward and imagine the warmth brushing your face. It is weak but undeniable. For someone used to bitter darkness, that tiny warmth must have felt like a new kind of hope. The sleepers gather nearer to the glow, forming tighter circles. Their breath mixes with the faint heat. The cave's soundscape alters too. The soft crackle of burning grass replaces the endless dripping of water. Even the smallest flame holds presence. A curious thought sometimes raised in paleoanthropology is that early fire use might not have been focused on cooking at first. Instead, it may have been valued simply for comfort, light, or protection. You picture a group placing a flickering flame near the entrance of a cave. Predators see it and hesitate. The fire does not need to burn brightly. It only needs to suggest danger to creatures who fear the strange glow. You adjust your hide and watch the imagined flame dim slightly. It sputters. Someone shifts closer, blowing softly, placing new tinder near the weak ember. Their breath guides the flame into brightness again. This small ritual reveals how knowledge begins to take shape. A skill is passed through quiet observation rather than instruction. A child sees how the adult shields the flame with a cupped hand. Later, the child mimics it. Skill echoes through time. You close your eyes, feeling the difference between a night without fire and a night with even the smallest flicker. The air feels more alive. Dreams shift. The stone walls warm slightly. Danger seems farther away, even if only by a few breaths. Yet fire remains unreliable. Sometimes it fails. Sometimes weather kills it. Sometimes groups wander for weeks without finding a new ember. You imagine the disappointment when a treasured ember dies faster than expected, leaving the group once more in darkness. Their sighs echo through the cave. They return to the old rhythms, curling together, relying again on muscle and instinct. Another question specialists often discuss is how the introduction of fire changed social bonds. Perhaps people lingered longer at dusk, watching the tiny flame. Perhaps stories began here, not spoken in complex language, but shaped through gestures, expressions, and subtle sounds. You imagine someone tracing a pattern on the wall illuminated by firelight, inspiring a child to dream differently than their ancestors. Fire becomes a stage for imagination. You look up toward the ceiling and picture soot collecting slowly, in small patches at first. Later generations may find these faint black stains and wonder what caused them. For you in this moment, the stains signal a turning point. Light begins to shape the cave. Warmth begins to extend its reach. Sleep itself slowly transforms. You imagine a winter night when the group, having kept a tiny fire alive for hours, sleeps with looser postures. Legs stretch a little farther. Arms relax. The air becomes more bearable. For the first time in countless ages, the dark inside the cave recedes just enough to reveal the shapes of those you love. The glow flickers across their faces, instantly engraving their features into memory. You sit quietly, letting the imagined flame dim again. The group still sleeps in clusters, still relies on warmth from bodies, still listens to wind and predators. Nothing changes overnight. But the presence of fire, even in its earliest inconsistent form, plants a seed, a beginning, a quiet shift that will grow across generations. And as the flame fades back into darkness in your imagination, the story guides you gently toward the last fireless winter, a symbolic moment where ancient ways stand on the edge of transformation. You step closer to the imagined tunnel of darkness, feeling the last cold breath of a world that has shaped everything you have explored so far. The cave around you grows still, as if holding its breath for a final winter untouched by flame. You stand among the sleeping forms, their hides gathered tightly, their breaths rising in faint, ghost-like wisps. This moment feels like a threshold. One last night lived in the ancient way before the quiet glow of dependable fire begins to reshape the rhythm of human survival. You kneel and press your hand to the cool earth, sensing the echo of a world about to change. You picture a family settling down for sleep. Their movements are practiced. A hide is folded just so. Moss is smoothed. Children are tucked inward toward the warmest center of the cluster. An elder checks the entrance one more time, feeling for drafts, listening for predators, sensing changes in the wind. They return to the circle, letting their body merge with the warmth of the others. These habits, shaped across hundreds of thousands of winters, linger unchanged in this final moment. You lower yourself onto the bedding and imagine the weight of the hide settling over your shoulders. The cold presses in, familiar but still sharp. There is no flicker of firelight, no glow to define shapes or soften fear. The cave breathes its ancient breath around you. You hear a soft hum of wind through the entrance, a faint drip of water deeper inside, and the slow, rhythmic pulse of group sleep. The darkness wraps you gently, the way it has wrapped countless ancestors. Some specialists who study the transition to habitual fire use suggest that the shift was gradual, not a single moment of revelation. But imagining this symbolic last winter helps you understand the depth of the world that came before. A world where survival was built from instinct, closeness, and endurance rather than flame. You feel a quiet respect settle into your chest as you picture the sleepers adjusting their positions, pressing closer, forming a living shelter against the cold. You imagine one of the adults turning slightly, exhaling a cloud of breath that drifts upward. Their face disappears into the darkness almost immediately. You lean against the wall and sense how deeply these habits run. The way they curl their knees, the way they tuck hands under hides, the way children nestle between adult bodies. Everything practiced, everything shaped by necessity. You close your eyes and allow the silence to settle. Without fire, the night feels endless. Time loses shape. Sleep comes not in one long stretch but in waves, interrupted by the need to adjust, check the entrance, or shift a child closer to warmth. You picture the group breathing in layered harmony. Their heartbeats slow, their muscles relax but never fully surrender. Even now, at the edge of a new era, vigilance remains part of rest. A thought surfaces from discussions among researchers. Once dependable fire became common, sleep likely changed forever. Deeper rest, longer cycles, more warmth. But tonight you imagine the opposite, letting yourself sink into the experience of this last fireless night. The cold aches in your bones. Your breath drifts in slow clouds. Your mind hovers between dreaming and waking, listening always for danger. You picture a child stirring softly, whimpering from a dream. A caregiver pulls them closer, humming quietly. You imagine the sound, low and warm, weaving through the darkness like a comforting thread. These small gestures carried families through nights colder than any you have ever known. This ancient compassion, older than language, older than fire itself, becomes the last light of the fireless world. You shift your weight and imagine standing again, looking at the sleeping circle. Their hides shine faintly in the dark. Their breath forms a thin fog above them. You feel the weight of time here. All the adaptations, the rituals, the instincts, the struggles, a long lineage of winter nights ending in this quiet moment. In your imagination, dawn approaches slowly. A pale sliver of light snakes into the cave. Outside, the world remains brutal, but something has shifted. Somewhere in the distance, a spark survives a storm. Somewhere, a group discovers how to coax flame reliably. And soon, this way of sleeping, this way of surviving, begins to fade. But tonight, in this final fireless winter, nothing has changed yet. The cold world holds its old form. The sleepers curl together, trusting in the warmth of their bodies. The cave shelters them. The darkness wraps them, and their breath continues rising like ancient incense. You take a slow breath, letting the quiet settle into your bones, preparing yourself for the soft wind down that closes the story. You let the final echoes of this imagined winter drift away as you settle deeper into the quiet. The cave grows softer in your mind, its stone edges smoothing into gentle curves, its cold touch warming into something almost tender. You picture the sleepers resting in their clustered circle, their breaths drifting upward in slow, steady spirals.